Sidney Brown's interception, apropos, iced the game in the fourth quarter for the Philadelphia Eagles. Nick Sirianni, his team 14 wins after a 2-2 start, and now they'll take on the Green Bay Packers in the Super Wildcard round of the playoffs. What's up, everybody? This is the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Live video streaming on the X platform and on YouTube and Instagram at Mike Gill Show. It's a snowy day, so if you're out there driving around, be safe. And if you're just lounging around the house today, you can watch us on all the platforms. Download the free mobile app and listen thanks to First Bank of Sea Isle City. You know, Sidney Brown got hurt in the final game last year. This year, it's his interception that seals the 14th win for the Philadelphia Eagles. It seals a matchup with the Green Bay Packers. What's up, everybody? I'm your host, Mike Gill. Josh Henning producing today's show. A snowy day out there. The road's not great, not terrible, I guess. I don't know. I drove a little while ago. It was all right getting here. But I know a lot of people probably not listening in their normal capacities today, but that's why we have multiple ways for you to get to us, and we already see the video numbers are charging upward. So hello, everybody out there watching. You know, I was at the game yesterday. Josh, you went to the game yesterday. That was did you know you were going to the game? Like, when did this come? This is Josh, like the kind of guy, he's going to a game, he wouldn't tell you. He just would have gone to and then he got here today and didn't ask anything about, like, hey, how was the game yesterday? Nothing.
I actually told you at New Year's Eve.
Did you?
Yes. Nick and I both were together. Remember? We were both at your party that night.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
Well, we both told you.
Okay.
And then you told us, oh, really? Because I'm going to the game, too.
Gotcha. All right. So you knew a while ago and you told me, and I don't remember.
Sorry.
All right. Well, how was the game yesterday?
Well, you know what? I always enjoy going to games like you because there's something about being in the building for a game, and I thoroughly enjoyed watching the backups.
See, I'd rather go to the game like yesterday. I want to go to a game that doesn't have a lot of, like, that's the kind of game that I like actually going to, where I can just enjoy a game, being in the building. You know, I'm not a big, like, rah-rah. I'm not a big boo. I'm not booing people. I'm not, like, getting into the whole Eagles chants and the songs.
I did.
I just like being there. I like being in the building. So yesterday is the kind of game that I want to go to. I don't like to go to like a high-intensity game, you know, because I got to focus on the game on the television.
Right.
But yesterday's a perfect game for someone like me to go to. I love being in the building. I love the pomp and circumstance. I love all the stuff. And I don't care. Once the game kicked off, it didn't matter if Kenny Gainwell had the ball or Saquon Barkley had the ball. You're still watching with, like, come on, make the move. You know, like, you're still watching it with that intensity. It makes you feel like, yes, I'm still I just love the competition in the sport. And, Tanner McKee yesterday. Now, I will say this. I'm not disparaging Tanner McKee at all. I thought he played pretty well yesterday for the most part. People are acting like Tanner McKee should be the starting quarterback this week against the Green Bay Packers because he played half decent. I got to be honest with you. I mean, he made a couple of really, like, easy throws, and he pitches and catches. He was fine. They ran the same play 20 times yesterday. They ran a little boot where he rolled out into the flat and then threw the ball to the tight end who was crossing across the backside, and the Giants just could not figure it out. He's playing against the Giants who didn't care. They ran the same play all day long. Let's not act like all of a sudden the Eagles found Joe Montana. But I will say, like, I'm not trying to rip the guy, but they didn't really open the playbook all that much for him. It was a lot of basic stuff that he does well.
What you just said there is important because when you roll a guy out, you're actually cutting off half the field. So what people forget is that if you're going to the right or to the left, the quarterback is no longer looking on the other end of the field. So they are literally taking half the playbook out of his hands.
Look, this was a play where they said, look, roll out, the tight end's going to be open. It was evident that they wanted to get Dallas Goedert involved in the game. Yep. They threw him the ball a bunch yesterday. They basically were like, listen, let's get Dallas a bunch of reps, just have him run this play. They had 6 targets in the game. You know, you had that play that they ran a whole bunch. They had Johnny Wilson run that play where he was the guy who was, coming across the backside. Yep. he had 5 targets in the game. Calcaterra had 4. E.J. Jenkins caught a ball. So between the tight ends and Johnny Wilson yesterday, you had like 15 targets. Jahan Dotson showed that, hey, I can actually play in this game as well. And he was running a very similar play over and over again.
It was a very vanilla offense.
It was a very vanilla offense. And Tanner McKee, listen, he was 27 of 41, too. Not like the highest efficiency in the world. He wasn't. Look, they asked Tanner McKee to throw the ball 40 times, which they only put up 20 points in the game. We're acting like Tanner McKee lit the Giants up for like people were legitimately telling me after the game that he should start the playoff game. Now, he makes a couple nice throws. I mean, obviously, that's what he is. He's a quarterback, and the Eagles' offensive line gave him protection yesterday.
But
he had time to throw. And he made throws. That's what backup quarterbacks like. Short, quick, get it out, let these guys make plays. But if we're on this Monday and we're talking about the Eagles and you wanting Tanner McKee to play quarterback, what are we doing, people?
You know, he actually didn't look so good in the third quarter, by the way. We should point out to people. He actually looked much better in the first half.
Yeah, I mean, he
played
okay. I thought he was good. And that's it.
The Giants started to figure out what they were doing.
Well, they ran the same play. I said to the guy next to me, I'm like, dude, they've run this play like 15 times. Enough already.
I will also say that there were a couple drops in the game as well. Johnny Wilson and Ias Smith. So who knows what his numbers would have been if they didn't drop the ball. He did a great job at doing the one thing they needed him to do, Mike. Elevate his trade possibility.
Yeah. And by the way, I don't think the Giants were all that interested in winning the game yesterday. They had a lot of peculiar moments in the game. They had a 4th down early in the game, 4th and 3. They went for it.
And the next one, they didn't go for it.
They did fake punt one time, and they made it. And you were like, maybe they are trying to win this game.
Then
I don't know what they were trying to do.
They changed the quarterbacks at one point. You're like, what is going on here?
It was a weird game. If I'm the Giants, I'm not trying to win that game. The Eagles, I'm almost trying to let the Giants win that game. Now the Giants end up with the 3rd pick in the draft, by the way.
Is that why John Maris keeping Daboll and Shane? Because they
lost the game, right. Well, you saw that Mayo got fired probably for winning.
Yes.
They would have had the number 1 pick in the draft, the Patriots. They end up losing the game, and they dropped down to, I think, 4th or 5th in the draft.
What a jerk. He was trying to win the game.
Unbelievable. So he ended up getting fired there. I thought Tanner McKee was fine. Now, you can certainly sell me on that he should be the backup for the playoff game. I have no problem with that conversation. Do I want Kenny Pickett or Tanner McKee coming into a situation if Jalen Hurts got hurt or cannot play? Then I think there's a conversation. But quite frankly, I hope it doesn't get to that point. I don't want to see Tanner McKee or Kenny Pickett play in a playoff game. The whole thing with Saquon Barkley. The Eagles yesterday, by the way, had 25 carries for 50 yards. They did not run the ball. Now you can say, well, Barkley's better than those guys, and he is. Shipley had 32 carries, and Gainwell had 14 yards. So they didn't run the ball particularly well yesterday. It's not like at the end of the day, like you know what it would have been. If Gainwell or Shipley ended up with like 150 yards, you would have been frustrated because you're like, Barkley would have got 150 yards.
Right.
But they did not run the ball well. It was Tanner McKee throwing the ball all over the place yesterday. I thought it was good to see Dotson get involved. I thought it was good that Goddard made a couple of catches. They got him involved early, then they kind of got him out of the game. The things on defense that stood out to me, Oren Burks was all over the place, by the way. He had 17 tackles, 2 for loss, so you feel better like if one of the linebackers ended up getting hurt, that Oren Burks. By the way, Jeremiah Trotter at 54 was all over the field. 90. I thought 90. Jordan Davis maybe played the best game that I've ever seen him play. I couldn't believe it.
Life.
I was like, Jordan Davis is playing the best game he's played since he's become an Eagle. He was all over the place. He was very good. I thought Ajomo was pretty good. The one guy who I thought really had a rough day at the office, I watched him a lot, was Huff, man. Whew, he was rough yesterday, and I know he's rusty, but they were just blasting him off. I watched Zero the entire first half. I didn't even see him much in the second half of that game. I thought Isaiah Rodgers played pretty well.
I thought both Rodgers and Ringo did a good job at showing the Eagles, hey, if Mitchell or Slay can't play X number of snaps in the postseason, the next guy up is going to be good enough.
Yeah, well, listen, so here's what happened yesterday. It was a clear indication of why you don't play Saquon Barkley. Saturday, we saw Zay Flowers get hurt in the game for Baltimore. I don't know that he's going to play in the game on Saturday. You saw yesterday Christian Watson, he got hurt in the game, and he has already been ruled out. So Green Bay's biggest target, he caught a touchdown in the opener against Philadelphia in Brazil. Christian Watson, he got hurt yesterday. He didn't get hit. He didn't do anything. He planted his foot and his knee buckled and gave out, and he is now out for the game. I know that Jordan Love got taken out of the game. I think he hit his funny bone, and they just said, you know what, we're not going to put him back out there.
Yeah, he said he couldn't feel his hand anymore.
Yeah, a little tingling from the funny bone. He hit his elbow, hit the helmet, and I think precautionary after that, they took him out. These teams lost players yesterday. Green Bay lost a key player yesterday. Baltimore, Zay Flowers, they lost a key player on Saturday night. You just could not take that chance.
By the way, the Lions lost Terry and Arnold last night.
The Lions lost Arnold last night. Now, I will say, those teams, they all had to win.
Correct.
Green Bay didn't specifically need to win the game. Now, I think I think Washington and Green Bay were doing everything under their power to try to lose yesterday so they didn't have to face Philadelphia, it seemed like.
By the way, I love Washington. Did you see what they did? They took Jaden Daniels out of the game.
Well, I think once they saw Love leave the game, I think they decided he almost got hurt. We're getting our guy out of the game. Look, you just couldn't take the chance. So I had no problem with the Eagles deciding to take Barkley and not play him and any of the other starters. And by the way, none of the players the only guys that played yesterday were Dallas Goedert because he had been hurt.
Right,
and they just wanted him to get some reps. And Jordan Davis, for some reason, they decided he had to go out there and play.
Well, you'll have Geoff Mosher on coming up for Football at 4. He has talked about on the Inside the Birds podcast this morning that the Eagles decided that it was more important to bring up other guys from the practice squad than more D linemen because they needed guys at other positions. So Jordan Davis had to play yesterday.
Well, I mean, he didn't have to. They could have had him as a reserve defensive lineman.
Well, you're not going to play Ojomo and Booker every snap.
No, but they had other options. Milton Williams, Thomas Booker, Moro Ojomo. I mean, you did have other guys that Jordan Davis, I thought, played more than like if you just said, hey, we have to dress somebody, I get it. You're only going to be in an emergency in case somebody ends up getting hurt and you have to go. No, he played regular snaps throughout the early portion of that game. Now, he ended up coming out of the game later on, but I thought Jordan Davis played maybe one of it. He was all over the place early in that first quarter. He was all over the place.
I mean, that might have been a confidence builder for him. I mean, that's got to be a game where he's got to look back and be like, hey, man, I just whooped some butt last week. Let's go.
Yeah, I don't know that that's how people think, Josh.
No?
I just whooped some butt. No, I don't think that's how these guys think. I think he just played his game, went out there. And look, take nothing from that game. Nothing carries over from one week to the next. He went out there. He played pretty well. I was surprised that he played. The Tanner McKee stuff was preposterous. Tanner McKee should not start this playoff game. Think about this. Kevin Kolb played a game, and I think it was against the Kansas City Chiefs whenever he got his chance to play. And Kevin Kolb went out there and threw for like an NFL record, like 380 yards or something like that. And that raised his trade stock. And he never came close to becoming that type of player. He played one really good game. Go look that game up.
I'm looking up now, yeah.
I think it was against Kansas City. Was his first game that he ever started. Kevin Kolb started one game. He was awesome in the game. And based on that start, he ended up getting a ton of value. He added the value. And this is what it's all about. I got some knucklehead trying to convince me that Kenny Pickett has value. Kenny Pickett does not have any value. Listen, if you're a fan and you're telling me you want Tanner McKee to be the backup or want him to start over Jalen Hurts or be the backup to Kenny Pickett, why would you think that Kenny Pickett has any value? The whole point of the conversation was, look, I don't think Pickett has any value. McKee could have raised his value that a team is so desperate that they overpay for him. They're not going to overpay to get Pickett. They might say, hey, now, I don't have a problem with this. If you say, we want to keep McKee, we'll trade Pickett, and you end up trading Pickett for like a 6th or 7th round pick, I don't have a problem with that. My point is, if somebody calls you and said, we're going to overpay to get McKee, in other words, we'll give you a 3rd round pick for that kid, the Eagles would have to say so fast, sold, deal. right? You have to take that deal. For a kid, he played okay yesterday. We're acting like the guy was awesome.
No, he wasn't awesome. By the way, so it was Kevin Cobb's second start against Kansas City. He had 327 yards, 2 touchdowns in his second start ever with the Eagles.
Yeah, and that game got him basically traded.
Well, he didn't get traded yet, so that was the year before they traded McNabb.
Yeah, he became the starter based on that one game.
Right, and then
because
they
he was
traded
so
him
good in
after
that
2010.
game, the Eagles decided we can go with this guy.
Correct.
Remember, they drafted Cobb in the second round, so they really spent a high draft pick on him. He got a chance to play, and that was enough for the Eagles to say we can trade McNabb.
Right.
And then he ends up not being very good.
Right,
My
then
point is
Michael
this.
Vick took
You
his
can
job.
show a flash in one game, and that doesn't mean you're very good. We
No,
all saw
but-
Bobby Hoying's career,
Well,
right?
I was going to go more like guys like Matt Flynn and Charlie Whitehurst. Those are guys.
Yeah,
with
but
that
I'm talking
run
about
game.
people have heard of.
I mean, come on, people. If you don't know, everyone is. You just don't watch sports.
Well, you're assuming that everybody watches sports like you.
I assume people who like football watch football.
Yeah, but you're giving some guys, Matt Flynn and Charlie Whitehurst.
I mean, Matt Flynn was the guy that 5-touchdown game against the Patriots.
I know who you're talking about, but like Charlie Whitehurst, I mean, I know
Touchdown
who he is.
Jesus.
I know who he is, but most people remember. I'm trying to localize it, Josh. This is an audience that is very local to their roots. They remember Bobby Hoying being very good for like 4 games, and then after that just crashing and burning. That is a little bit more relatable than Charlie Whitehurst.
I mean, I would go, if I was going to go local, more A.J. Feely, because the Eagles got a third-round pick for him.
Yeah, they did. No, he's another example of a guy that they traded after, but Feely had been around for a little while and basically was the backup there, and then he got a chance to start sometimes. And, but this is the thing. These teams get so desperate that they have to overpay. So the whole McKee thing, it's not that I want to trade Tanner McKee. I'm not asking to. I'm not begging the Eagles to trade Tanner McKee. It is, hey, if somebody is going to be so desperate, they're not going to be desperate for Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett hasn't done anything for a team to be desperate. They might say, hey, do you want to trade Pickett? We'll give you a 5th or 6th or 7th. And you say, yeah, okay, we're comfortable enough with McKee. The point I'm making is I think that someone will give you more for McKee, and the Eagles will say, we're comfortable enough with Pickett as the backup.
Correct.
It's not that there's a huge gap between Pickett and McKee. They're saying, okay, maybe McKee's better. I'm not here to debate who's better, Pickett or McKee. I'm saying the Eagles might say, we can get more for McKee than we can for Pickett.
Right, but it's the idea. It's less about the Eagles wanting to trade him or Mike Gill wanting to trade him. It's the fact that the Giants, the Jets, the Colts, the Seahawks, the Browns, the Titans, and the Saints all are going to be needing quarterbacks soon. So if you are those teams, are you looking at this draft class and saying, I like these quarterbacks? Or are you looking at a guy who had 2 games in the NFL, he has 4 touchdowns and no interceptions, and saying,
yeah,
you know what, I'm going to take a shot on that guy.
Well, and he's cheaper. He makes a lot less money than Pickett does. And by the way, Pickett,
Or drafting a first-round pick.
And Pickett is also set to be a free agent at the end of the year. So a team likely doesn't want to trade anything of value to try to bring on a player. Let's say he becomes Sam Darnold, and Pickett goes in there, and he plays really, really well, although Darnold was terrible last night.
Yeah.
And then it puts that team in position to have to pay Pickett. That's not a envious spot for a team to be in. They're not going to trade and say, give us a guy who's going into free agency. They might say, we'll give you a 7th-round pick, a 6th-round pick. They would much rather say, hey, what I saw from that kid on Sunday, and he's making how much money? I'll take a crack at him. Here's a 3rd-round pick. Give us that guy. We're not paying him anything, and we'll take a chance with this guy. That's why I think McKee offers so much more value for Philadelphia. It's not that I want to trade McKee. It's not that I think Pickett's better than McKee. I just think he gives you the potential of a lot more value. And you saw that yesterday. That was what yesterday was for Philadelphia.
It was a
day for them to say, is there a team out there? We're going to play this kid, Tanner McKee. And we're going to, by the way, they asked Tanner McKee to throw the ball 41 times yesterday. What do you think the Eagles were doing?
Showcasing him.
They were showcasing this kid around the league to say, hey, we asked this guy to throw 41 times. We trust him. My
And so
phone
should
is
you.
open. If you need a quarterback, we got a guy. But I would imagine the Eagles aren't just going to give Tanner McKee away. In other words, if someone says, hey, we'll give you a 6th-rounder for McKee, the Eagles are going to say politely, no thank you. But if somebody says, I'll give you a 3rd, the Eagles will say, thank you very much. You can have Tanner McKee. We're quite okay with Kenny Pickett. Look, this was what yesterday was about. It was about not getting anybody hurt. It was about showcasing Tanner McKee, and it was a chance for other guys. I thought Will Shipley, 10 carries, 32 yards. He didn't do much there. He had a couple catches. You did see some shiftiness and some ability to make guys miss. I thought he played pretty well. Gainwell didn't do much yesterday as the other back. I thought it was great to see Dotson really be highlighted he had 11 targets. He had 7 catches. He had 94 yards, but he caught the ball in a variety of places and spots on the field. Getting Goddard a little bit of play yesterday. Aniyah Smith had a nice touchdown catch. Johnny Wilson made a couple catches on that same exact play. They were kind of almost using him as like a tight end yesterday. I thought that, the guys I mentioned at the beginning, Orrin Burks, Jeremiah Trotter, thought Jordan Davis played pretty well. The secondary, I thought, did a really good job. I mean, they held Neighbors to 5 catches, 64 yards. Wan'Dale Robinson had 10 catches, but he only had 43 yards. They tackled well yesterday. I remember the other day, I said I must have slipped out there, and I got to be honest, I don't remember saying I think the Eagles will win the game. But Mosher texted me, and he's like, do you really think the Eagles' backups are going to beat the Giants' starters? I was like, well, if I said that, I don't know. Like, maybe it just was like in the flow of the conversation. I think I said the Eagles are going to end up 14-3. And he's like,
Right.
Do you really think they're going to beat them? The Eagles' backups didn't beat the Giants. They manhandled them.
And I think that is the biggest takeaway from the game, and that is you're going into the postseason with arguably the deepest team in the NFC.
You are, and we're going to get into the matchup coming up in just a bit. They have the Green Bay Packers, and you are playing the Packers for the second time this year. They beat the Packers the first time. It was a good game. It was a back-and-forth game. It was the kind of game that obviously you can build off of and take some things from. We're going to take a look back at that game, some of the things that the Eagles have moving forward. Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City, pressofac.com, set to join me on a busy Monday edition of the Sports Bash. Now, remember, it is very snowy out there. We get it. So maybe you need a different way to consume the product today. You can download the free mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. You can watch us on YouTube, X platform, Instagram, at Mike Gill Show. Get on board. Be a part of the show. 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. That's the text board. When we return, Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City and pressofac.com. It is Black Monday in the NFL. Doug Peterson has been fired. The Giants are retaining Brian Daboll and Joe Shane, so they are back as a pair. We also have more firings. Jared Mayo, the Patriots, he has been fired. We'll get up to that and more. Nick Sirianni today at 3:30, his day after presser. We'll get an update on Jalen Hurts potentially. All that and more. Monday edition. We are live, by the way, inside the Fanatic Sportsbook Studios. We are not at Ocean Casino today due to the weather. We will be there later on this week, either tomorrow or Wednesday, most likely. We'll update you on that as well. More Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. 231 Sports Bash is brought to you by Autumn Lake Healthcare Center, skilled nursing rehab with elite-level care and a warm and vibrant atmosphere. Visit autumnlakehealthcare.com to find a location near you. Mike Gill in the Sports Bash. Smash the like button, hit the subscribe, watch us live. If you're driving around in the car, be safe out there. If you're listening on the app, you can watch on the YouTube channel, at Mike Gill Show, on the X platform, at Mike Gill Show, on Instagram, at Mike Gill Show. It's the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. I want to say hello to all the people watching on the IG, on the YouTube, on the X platform. Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City is here. The Eagles are heading to the playoffs. The Giants are retaining their entire, I don't want to say their entire coaching staff, but the Brain Trust is back. It's a great day in the NFC East as we get ready for the Eagles and Packers this weekend. And that game, by the way, 4:30 on 97.3 ESPN. The pregame coverage starts at 3. What's going on, Mike McGarry? How are you?
Mike, very good, very good. And the only person with more pressure on him, 4:30 on Sunday than the Eagles and the Packers will be Tom Brady, as he needs to step up his act, as that is the prime spot. You know, a lot of people think that Sunday night spot is prime, that Monday night spot, but more people watch that late Sunday game, and Tom Brady needs to rise to the occasion this Sunday.
Well, I'll tell you, it's funny you say that because he's going to have the NFC Championship game too, and then the Super Bowl. But that NFC Championship game, more people probably pay attention and watch the NFC Championship game than I know more people watch the Super Bowl, but how many are paying attention? So Brady's under the microscope. The Eagles are under the microscope. They beat the Giants yesterday in a game that was kind of meh, but what do you think of the matchup now with the Packers? We saw the Packers yesterday. It's exactly why the Eagles held their starters. Christian Watson, torn ACL. He is out for the game. They had to remove Jordan Love. They said he's okay. But, man, that was one of the reasons why Barkley and the starters did not play in that game yesterday.
Yeah, and then they beat the Giants with basically the JV squad. Not even, Kenny Gainwell didn't even get a lot of carries. I think he had 5 carries for 13 yards. They went to the other guy. Shipley put the third-string running back in there, and they still beat the Giants. Look, I know a lot of people this week, the narrative is going to be, here come the Packers. They're going to do what they did last year, going in and beating the Cowboys in that, wild card round. But I think the Eagles are in good shape. The only thing that scares me is people apparently agree with me because the Eagles opened as 3.5-point favorites. Now the line's up to 4.5, 5 in some places. But I think the Eagles are in good shape because, Mike, this is a football team that is basically 2 drop passes away from being 16-1.
They really are. I mean, when you think about it. Now, conversely, Carolina dropped. I mean, so, yeah, back and forth, there's a couple. But this team, 14 wins. Did they exceed expectations? I mean, there was so much at the beginning of this year, Mike. We're just kind of watching and saying what happened last year. Did we think anything from last year was going to creep? Has this team at 14-3 exceeded expectations?
Well, exceeded expectations from the point that expectations might have been tamped down because of the last season's late season collapse, right? Going from 10-1 and seeing things fall apart, and then playoff performance in Tampa Bay where they didn't even show up. So they've exceeded expectations, certainly from that respect. But I think as the playoffs begin, Mike, there's some pressure on the Eagles here. This is a team, to me, I don't want to say Super Bowl or bust, but this is a team that has been very, very good for a while. And, they need to put another championship on the board here, and this team can do it.
Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City, pressofac.com. One of the stories, from the game itself yesterday was Tanner McKee. I know, I suggested that the Eagles have done this in the past. They have showcased a guy and ended up getting value for him. There's people saying, no, there are people that want Tanner McKee to start the game on Sunday. You do know that, right?
Yeah, I think people are getting a little bit carried away with Tanner McKee. Yeah, he did look good yesterday, but and he looked good the week before. But let's not go crazy here. If you want to tell me that next season Tanner McKee can be your backup quarterback and you want to get rid of Kenny Pickett, maybe I can, deal with that. But, Jalen Hurts has got to be behind center here for the Eagles to do anything in the postseason.
I agree with that. The sentiment I put out there on Friday is, listen, and I think the Eagles showcased him. He threw the ball 41 times. He looked pretty proficient in doing so. If the Eagles got a call I don't think the Eagles would hesitate at all to say, hey, you want to give us a third-round pick for this guy? We will certainly take it. People are saying, no, you keep him and trade Pickett. Well, Pickett has no value. The whole point is he has added to his value, and that is who Howie Roseman is, Mike, right? He will – you want to take our third-string guy for a third-round pick? Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, with all the famous Howie quote, when he drafted Jalen Hurts, we want to be a quarterback factory, and a lot of people snickered that were on that Zoom call that day, probably including me. And lo and behold, the Eagles are a quarterback factory. So who am I? They do have a way of picking these guys out. Look, I know Tanner McKee looked good yesterday, but let's face facts. They were playing a Giant team that, was, already at kickoff was at 1 o'clock. At 1:05, the Giants were thinking about their tea times today in Cancun, basically. So let's not get too carried away with how good Tanner McKee looked, although he did look good yesterday. But the less you see of Tanner McKee from this point on is positive for the Eagles. Nick Foles, that only happens once in a lifetime. Tanner McKee is not going to come in and lead the Eagles to a Super Bowl championship.
Well, and I said before, yes, I was at the game yesterday. I thought he was pretty good. They kept everything pretty simple for him. It was a rollout, throw to the tight end. He'll be open in the flat. That play was there all day long. There was a little here to Dotson that he hit for the most part. Even with as quote-unquote well as he played, they scored 20 points against the Giants yesterday. It wasn't like he lit this team up for 35. I mean, they scored 10 first-half points. He did not play well in the third. I mean, they scored 20 points in the game. I couldn't believe it. People are like, this guy's got to start. I said, they scored. Did I miss something? He scored 20 points in the game.
Yeah, to me yesterday, and I watched a little bit of the game, switching in and out, watching some other games and stuff like that. To me, that game had a preseason game feel, and it was preseason game. I guess it would be number 3 now, where you don't play any starters and you rest people. And I think the Giants were pretty vanilla on defense. Certainly you're going to see more intricate defenses in the playoffs than what the Giants trotted out there yesterday. I think that was just kind of played with the intensity and strategy of a preseason game yesterday. So he looked pretty good. He's an intriguing guy going forward because of what he showed the last 2 weeks. But again, this is what drives me nuts about Eagles fans here. Let's keep the eye on the prize here, and for that to happen, Jalen Hurts has got to be behind the center.
All right. How important is Game 1? You said there's some pressure here for Nick Sirianni. Is he in any way, shape, or form in a round 1 super wild card weekend must-win scenario?
Yeah, I don't think he is, but I think this franchise is for a couple of factors. First of all, I think the fact is you sacrificed, the Saquon Barkley record for playoff success, right? So if you come away with a first-round loss, now you don't have the record, now you don't have playoff success, so the season leaves a bad taste in your mouth. I don't know how you would get rid of a guy with Sirianni's record, but I think, there would be changes in the coaching staff perhaps if they did lose this first-round game. But I think this is a team that at minimum, Mike, has to get to that NFC title game. And if they're in Detroit, well, then you go play the game and you see what happens. Because I thought the Lions were pretty impressive last night with what they did against the Vikings. And I think the Lions are very good football team. So I'm not saying you got to get to that Super Bowl, but I think bare minimum you got to get to that NFC title game. And if it's in Detroit, we'll let the chips fall where they may. If somehow Detroit gets knocked off and the Eagles are hosting that NFC title game, then I think it's Super Bowl or bust. Because I go back, like Andy Reid got here in 1999, right? They won 5 games that year. The next year they won 10, 11 games. And since 2000, now it's 2025, they've basically been good or a contender every one of those years. Yet during that time, they've only been to 3 Super Bowls and they've only won 1. This is a team that, for all they've achieved in the regular season, needs to win another championship. They need to solidify who they are. They need to solidify the Jeffrey Lurie era, and they need to do it with a Super Bowl title. And I don't know if you're going to have a better chance this year than this year with the weapons you have on offense, the year Barkley has had. And like I said, you're 2 drop passes away from being 16-1.
Yeah, it's funny because we talked about the 14 wins, and you talk about Nick Sirianni. You think about all of the Andy Reid teams. This might be the best regular season that this franchise has ever had.
Yeah, I mean, while the 14 wins are they a club record or they're tied for a club record?
Second time they have 14 wins. I think they were 14-2 one of those Andy Reid years.
Right, and you think back to the Andy Reid year. I was thinking about this last night when I looked at this and said, how can the Eagles only have one Super Bowl championship? How could they only been to three? You know, there were those losses in the NFC title games in the early 2000s. I'm sure the loss to Tampa Bay, what was that, the last game ever played at the Vet, kind of sticks in people's craws to these days. But this is an Eagles team that has had, for a quarter of a century now, has been a top contender more often than not, yet they only have the one championship. I think to solidify that, they've got to get another one. And again, I don't know if you're going to have a better chance than you have this year because, you know, no one wants to predict injuries or anything like that, but is Saquon Barkley going to be healthy for all 17 games next season? Is Jalen Hurts going to be healthy? Are the offensive linemen going to be healthy? Are they going to have the luck they've had this year? Next year. So this is a prime opportunity, and they have to take advantage of it. And it starts with beating, Green Bay. And I know people are going to be scared about Green Bay and stuff like that, but, I just go back to the opening game where the Eagles beat Green Bay in Brazil in a game that Jalen Hurts tried to hand to the Green Bay Packers, and the Eagles were still good enough to overcome Hurts' mistakes and win that game.
By the way, the Eagles went 14-3. They've only won 14 games twice. Both have been under Nick Sirianni. He was 14-3 in 2022. Now, this year, they were 2-2 at one point, Mike, and there was calls about Nick Sirianni and people wanting to, we're saying they got to move on. He's the problem. You wonder what has changed from 2-2 to 14-3.
Well, I think one thing they started to figure out who they were offensively, right? And maybe that was the adjustment of Kellen Moore coming in. And I think the adjustment defensively of Vic Fangio coming in because they improved every week defensively and offensively. And you got to give those coordinators some credit. They kind of figured out who they were. They were able to sort of rely on Saquon Barkley and then blend in some timely passes from Hurts and timely runs from Hurts. And the defense just got better week after week after week. And to me, this is the best Eagles defense since, Jim Johnson was the defensive coordinator under Andy Reid.
Yeah. All right, Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City, pressofac.com. As a Giant fan, are you disappointed in the patience that they are showing, or do you like the fact that they are showing patience?
Yeah, I'm not disappointed. I understand. Again, I think I said this last week. To me, the Giants are exactly where the Commanders were a year ago at this time. A year ago at this time, now I know the Commanders got a new owner and they brought in a new coach and everything else, but the Commanders won 4 games last year. Then they got a quarterback and they were able to take off this year and get to the playoffs. To me, the Giants are the same thing. If you look at the roster, there are some good players on that roster. There's Dexter Lawrence. There's Brian Burns. There's Neighbors, the wide receiver. There's the left tackle. They have some good players, but their quarterback play has been terrible. I don't know what you gain out of switching the general manager and coach. I will say this. Joe Shane is going to have a chance now to pick who the quarterback could be, whether they draft somebody, whether they get a bridge quarterback. They try to do what the Vikings did with Sam Darnold this season. But now Shane and Daboll are on the clock. They're going to be playing with their quarterback next year, and they've got to show marked improvement to come back at the end of next season. So I have no problem with the Giants retaining these guys for now. I don't know what change for change sake will do. But those two guys are out, get to pick their quarterback this offseason, and they better win next season, or we're having a different conversation, the Monday after next season ends.
It's funny. I think you're right about the quarterback thing. They have some pieces if they can get the quarterback. They do have that loss yesterday moved them from potentially the 8th pick down to the 3rd pick. So can they get their quarterback at number 3? That will be the big story of the offseason for the New York Football Giants, who end the season. Did you ever envision 3-14 this year? Was that a thought?
No, I did not think it would be 3-14. When the over-unders came out, for the year, just so Vegas always knows, I think they were, 6.5, 7 wins. I thought they'd win 8-9 games this year. I never saw 3-14 coming. But again, better to have that draft pick and better to go forward now.
So you want
the quarterback.
Do you want a drafted quarterback, or are you like Sam Darnold? You want to go down that road? What's your initial thought?
Yeah, I don't know, Mike, because picking these quarterbacks is so difficult, right? You look at even the guys who do it for a living, quarterbacks selected in the first round, there might be, a 50-50 success rate, right? So do you go back and get, do you try to rehabilitate the guy, the backup quarterback on the Steelers, whose name I forget now off the top of my head, but played for the Bears? Do you make a trade with Minnesota? If they re-sign Donald, do you go get McCarthy, the kid out of Michigan who injured his knee and didn't play that year? Do you bring him in? So I think it'll be interesting to see whichever way you go. Mike, I'm not going to be fussy. I just want a quarterback who can throw the ball to the guys who are wearing the same uniforms as we are, basically.
All right, there you go. The Giants offseason, we will certainly keep an eye on the NFC East, but the Eagles and the Commanders, those two are moving on to the playoffs, and, of course, you can hear them all unfold right here on 97.3 ESPN. Mike McGarry, we'll talk to you Wednesday, pal.
All right, we'll see you down the road. Thank you.
All right, there's Mike, and, of course, the Sports Bash this hour on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, live video streaming on the X platform and on YouTube at Mike Gill Show. Follow us there. Hit the like button. Smash that subscribe button. And don't forget, coming up, Grayson's grades. Also, Nick Sirianni's Day After Presser. We'll try to find out more on Jalen Hurts here on the Sports Bash. 2:53 Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. I'm going to give you quick scenarios here. Eagles will play the Packers, okay? So Eagles-Packers this Sunday on 97.3 ESPN. Here's the scenarios. If the Eagles win, if Tampa wins and the Rams win, they'll play Tampa. If Tampa wins and Minnesota wins, they'll play Tampa. If Washington and the Rams win, the Eagles will play the Rams. If Washington and Minnesota win, the Eagles will play Minnesota. Minnesota finished as the fifth seed with that loss last night. So most likely scenarios, they cannot play on the road, by the way. They will play at home this week, and then if they win, they will also play on the road again, at home this week and next week, no matter what. They cannot play on the road in the divisional round. The most likely opponent under everything would be Tampa Bay. So it would be Green Bay this week, Tampa Bay possibly next week. So your three possible opponents would be Tampa, the Rams, and Minnesota. You cannot play Washington. All right? There you go. All right, coming up, Scott Grayson's grades are up. You can check them out after every Eagles game at 973ESPN.com. Scott Grayson from Fox 29 chimes in on the other side. His thoughts on the Eagles season. Grayson grades the season, the regular season. And what did he think of Tanner McKee and the Eagles yesterday and this matchup with the Green Bay Packers? That's all coming up next on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Merrill Reese on the call on 97.3 ESPN. Remember, you can listen to Merrill and Mike right here on 97.3 ESPN this weekend. The coverage starts at 3. Merrill and Mike have the call at 4:30 on 97.3 ESPN, your home for Eagles playoff football. Grayson's Grades are brought to you by GMS Law. Make the right call. 4 convenient locations to serve you at gmslaw.com. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash. A little snowy day out there, but we got you. If you can't find us in your normal capacities on the radio on 97.3 ESPN, you can download the free mobile app on your phone, powered by First Bank of Sea Isle, YouTube at Mike Gill Show, X platform at Mike Gill Show, Instagram at Mike Gill Show. Plenty of ways to get us today. Scott Grayson, Fox 29, Grayson's Grades after every Eagles game. We'll take a look at the season and everything. Nick Sirianni set to speak in about a half an hour today. Tanner McKee, 27 of 41, 269, 2 touchdowns, his first career start, and he's the second Eagle since the merger to throw for 250 and 2 touchdowns in his first career start since Carson Wentz did it back in 2016. Wentz played yesterday. He did not look very good. McKee, as you heard in that call from Merrill Reese, threw that opening touchdown pass, a 15-yarder to Anais Smith. It's Smith's first touchdown. It was 4 plays, 51 yards. McKee was 3 of 3. Every throw for 15 or more yards. He had a completion of 16 and 17 to Dallas Goedert. Boy, this McKee guy looked pretty good there, Scott Grayson. If we were going through all the grades very difficultly, if we were really grading that game yesterday, Tanner McKee would have got what?
He'd have got an A. I really liked what I saw from the kid. I think he's going to make Howie look like a genius again. You know, you got the quarterback factory, and you got 2 backup quarterbacks right now, in my opinion. Either one would be fine servicing in that role. But as you're heading into the playoffs, I think, you know, it's a luxury the Eagles have. But in the offseason, I think that Tanner McKee has played himself into a position where he should be a backup somewhere, at the very least. And whether it's here because you trade Kenny Pickett, which is what I would do strictly from a cost-benefit standpoint. McKee costs you very little, whereas Kenny Pickett's a little bit more. So I'd be looking to trade Kenny Pickett, keep Tanner McKee. I like this guy. I like his size. I like the way he moved when he was rolling out. I like the way he handled pressure. I like the way he threw the out. That's a tough ball to throw, and he threw it right on the money a lot to those guys on the sideline. But his composure. I just think, you know, in talking to him earlier in the week before the start and then seeing him yesterday go out there, I just think the guy's he's got the potential to have a future in this league, and I think he's showing that.
Yeah, I agree with you on a lot there. You know, I think McKee, Pickett, the problem with Pickett is I don't think he has any value. I don't think anybody wants to give you anything. I actually think the Eagles showcased McKee yesterday, threw the ball 41 times, in hopes that someone will call and overpay for him. Because I think you could get somebody to say, hey, we'll give you a third-rounder for that kid. I don't think you're getting anybody that's all that interested in Pickett. They're like, I got into this conversation with somebody on social media yesterday. Would I rather McKee over Pickett? Yeah, sure. But I don't think Pickett has any value. I think McKee played himself into value now.
Well, I think there's certainly a lot more unknown and potential higher ceiling. And, you know, Pickett had his shot to be a starter. Doesn't mean he won't be one again. But, you know, with McKee, you just saw one start against the Giants starters for the most part. And, you know, he did well with backups out there on the field. And I think you look at that, if you're another team who's, you know, maybe looking for a quarterback this year and thinking we're either drafting too low and we don't want to move up, or, you know, we don't really like some of the guys coming out in this quarterback class, you know, you could kick the tires on him for sure. And yeah, I think a third-round pick wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility to get. We all know how he loves stocking up draft picks. And, look, Pickett has shown you he can be a backup quarterback here. I think Pickett's fine. He's serviceable. I would rather have McKee. I just like the money side of it, and I agree with you. I think teams would probably call about Tanner before Pickett, but there's teams in need out there this offseason for quarterbacks, but there always are. And I wouldn't be surprised if Howie's shopping one or both and seeing what comes back for either guy and rolling from there. But in the meantime, what the Eagles have is they've got an insurance piece in McKee should Pickett's ribs not be okay. or, Jalen go down in a game again. I think he's going to clear the concussion protocol once he completes practice on Wednesday, so I'm not too concerned about him. But, you need to have a serviceable backup ready to go. And the question really this week with Pickett's ribs is, and it's worth watching, what will the Eagles do with that spot this week?
Yeah, I agree. I was going to ask you about Jalen Hurts, and obviously, it's funny, how Eagles fans are, Scott. They want McKee to play in the game on Sunday. Well, Jalen hasn't played. He's been off for so many weeks. This guy showed he could throw the ball. We're not at that spot, are we?
No. Everybody needs to just pump the brakes a little bit and settle down. Come on now. I don't think you want to go put Tanner McKee in a survive and advance kind of game here in the playoffs unless you have to. Now, I think, look, Jalen's been to a Super Bowl. He's been through playoff starts before. Is there a risk of rust with him? Absolutely. I mean, it's been almost a month since he's played in a game. He barely touched that Commanders game before he got hurt. So is there an issue of rust? Yeah, I think there is. But when you have a running back like Saquon Barkley and you have an offensive line like this, I think he'll be able to shake that rust off. And you want him doing that in the Green Bay game. Because, look, Tanner McKee is not Nick Foles. I don't think people should start thinking that. Could he be if he got the chance? I don't know. Maybe he could prove me wrong. But I don't think that's your best path forward to the Super Bowl. Jalen Hurts is. And with this offense and running it, I just think everybody needs to settle down a little bit on trying to crown Tanner as the second coming here. I think he's got a bright future. I love his size, love what he did yesterday. But Jalen Hurts is the starter here, and he'll be starting on Sunday.
Yeah, we hope that he'll clear and start and everything is. But yesterday we saw some injuries around the league, Scott, and that's exactly why the Eagles, as much as we wanted to see Saquon Barkley get that record, I think yesterday was a real indication. And Saturday, you saw Zay Flowers, he got hurt. Christian Watson, he got hurt. Last night, Terrion Arnold, he got hurt. It kind of made you feel like, all right, the Eagles made the right decision, even if you really wanted to see Barkley go for it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I myself felt that way. I mean, my heart wanted to see Saquon go for it. He probably, looking at that Giants defense yesterday, would have gotten it in like a quarter and a half. But, him being out there would have put the starting offensive line out there. You got to put the starting receivers out there just to keep the defense honest. And, you trickle down. If any one of those guys got hurt, all for Saquon, it would have affected this team. And you looked at who they were going to be playing, and this is part of it too. I mean, the Packers and the Commanders both had their starters out there. So whoever you were going to play, you were going to have a rested, healthy team taking on a team that just kind of fought their way through whatever game it was. And I know the Commanders took Jaden Daniels out. Doesn't matter for the Eagles now. They're not playing him. But you mentioned Christian Watson. Jordan Love, Malik Willis, both the quarterbacks for Green Bay got banged up. So, and honestly, I was listening to post-game sound from Green Bay yesterday. They've lost 2 in a row. Losing like that, they've lost 2 games by a total of 4 points. That team is trying to find itself right now. I think that all things worked out well for the Eagles, playing a Green Bay team that's trying to figure out what it's doing. Those players sounded a lot like the Eagles did going into the playoffs last year. And that was not a good place for this team to be. So the Eagles are rested. They're healthy. They're ready to go. And I think, and it was good yesterday, too. This is not nothing. Dallas Goedert shaking off a little bit of rust in his first game in over a month. So I think all signs point to, a good thing, a good draw for the Eagles next week.
Give me your thoughts on Sirianni here. 14 wins, second time 14. They were 2-2, rumbling about his job. Put it behind them. Now people are speculating, well, what if they lost at home in the wild card round? Is Nick in any trouble at all in these playoffs?
I don't want to say 100% certainty that he's not. Because, the question then becomes, okay, how do they lose? Why do they lose? Because I think those would be important. But he's taken this team to a Super Bowl. They've been to the playoffs all 4 years. He had a 1 seed one year. He's got a 2 seed this year. Won the division title multiple times. It's won like 50 games when you include the playoffs in these 4 years. I don't know how you justify moving on from him. Because this season, the 14 wins, I think you directly have to put your finger on Nick and say he had his pulse on this team at that bye week to turn it around. I mean, we all went into that bye week going, wow, this could be a really long season. And do you really want a new coach? Like, this is kind of not getting talked about enough yet because we're all focused on the postseason, and I get it. But, next year's schedule is, who your opponents are. 11 of your 17 games are going to be against playoff teams. That is a lot. Do you really want a new coach with a new team going through that? I say no. I would like to see Nick here. I don't see Vic Fangio going anywhere. Could Kellen Moore get some opportunities? Yeah, he might get some opportunities. I also think there's a chance, if he doesn't like what he sees out there in terms of the opportunities, that he comes back here for another year. Consistency would be great for this team, and if I'm Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman, again, I reserve the judgment on how do they lose, why do they lose, what were the reasons, to kind of maybe say, okay, no, that's egregious.
All right, well, give me like how and why that scenario where you would start to say, you know what, maybe they just, yes, he's been great in the regular season. They won 50 games and all this stuff. But this loss, what type of loss would it be where on Monday, when we're talking about Grayson's grades, you would be questioning whether Sirianni should come back?
You get blown out. That would, number one, be the first thing that the reason why I would say they would consider it. Blown out at home like Green Bay did to Dallas last year. If that happened, I'd consider it. You look at it, and if the decision-making is just awful. Now, he's got some issues, and we haven't talked about it yet, but what do you do in fourth and 3 with a 45, 48-yard field goal for Jake Elliott? Right now, I'm probably going for it. I think there's some issues there, and those kind of decisions would be interesting to see how they play out, what he does. Does he do something crazy, or does he kind of stick to what he's been doing and trust his defense? Where those are all things I'm looking at if I'm Jeffrey Lurie as to whether or not. But number one, I think as long as they don't get blown out, if they lost a close game, I think he's safe. But again, it depends on how did that happen. Did he make it a stupid time management call that is unforgivable? Something like that.
34-29 was the game the first time. They're playing for the second time. This game for the teams that have met in week 1 and then in the wild card round of the playoffs. The team that lost week 1 has won all 4 times this has happened. So that bears well for the Packers. What is something about that game that you remember that worries you?
Honestly, that game, nothing worries me because the Eagles didn't even know who they were. And I talked to several players after the game on Wednesday about that, how much different they are as an offense or defense since they went out there in week 1. I mean, the Eagles weren't relying on Saquon Barkley, totally there. It was not the offense that it is now. The defense was nowhere near the kind of defense that it is now. It was trying to figure out what it was doing under Vic. And so I think this, and the players kind of said it. They said, look, there are some things you can see on film from that game that have stuck as tendencies for an opponent. But in terms of how they are, the Eagles as an offense and a defense feel that they are so different that was like a season ago. And that's what they told me. So I'm not worried about that first game. What I remember about that game, honestly, the first thing I remember is that there was poor footing for both teams. So I don't know what kind of a read you really got on both teams. I do remember the Eagles knocked Jordan Love out. So you got to wonder, is he going to come in already coming off of what happened to him in this last game with that in the back of his mind against his defense? And no Christian Watson. I just think these teams, so much time has passed that will they look at that game? Yes. They will watch film of that game, but will they take a lot away from it? No, I think it'll be more of what these teams have done over the last 2 to 3 weeks that really is what they both focus on going into this one.
By the way, in that game back in week 1, Saquon Barkley, 132 scrimmage yards. He had 3 touchdowns in that game, if you remember. A.J. Brown had a 67-yard touchdown. There was a lot of big plays in that game, 34-29. And it's one of the things, we talked about injuries. They lost Christian Watson yesterday. He's out for this game. He's done for the year. He's got a torn ACL. He had a touchdown in that game against Philadelphia, but they are a really big – he's their one big play threat. He's kind of the guy – I mean, they have a lot of receivers. I know that's kind of their story is they've got a whole bunch of guys. But he's the one guy that's kind of the big play guy. And them losing him with the Eagles secondary, that's one matchup that I really like Philadelphia the second time around. I know he didn't have a huge game in terms of catches and yards in that first game. The receiver in that game that had the big day was Jalen Reed, had 4 for 138. But Watson is kind of their big play guy, and I think if Reed is the only guy that you really have to worry about, that's a big advantage for Philly the second time around.
Yeah, and I'll say this, too. I think the Eagles have become a much better run-stopping team. And so you look at, they use Josh Jacobs. Jacobs had a pretty good year. I'm not that worried about the Eagles' run defense against Jacobs. To your point, then, if they're able to keep Jacobs in check, you start making Green Bay have to go to the air a lot more, and they don't have Watson, as you pointed out. I think if the Eagles can get up on Green Bay, and I talked about their body language. If anybody wants to go back and listen to, if you can find it, any of the interviews from the Green Bay Packers after yesterday's loss, that's a deflated team. They talked about how it's like players got up and spoke to the team right after the game. That's how this team is kind of trying to find itself right now. So if the Eagles can get up on them a little early, start making them one-dimensional, you got to make Jordan Love beat you through the air, and he doesn't have Christian Watson. I mean, it's right in itself to how the Eagles can really win this game pretty easily. But it obviously is a lot easier said than done. And I think, Watson is just such a big weapon for them downfield that, and I think you're right. Why was Jordan Reed able to have such a good game? Probably because the Eagles were paying attention to Watson, and again, in Vic Fangio's defense, still trying to figure out the communication, how the zone. I remember they were pretty soft in their zones early in the year, and they've really clamped down on that a lot better. C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Reed Blankenship on the feel of that with their DBs. You didn't have Cooper DeJean playing and starting at that point at nickel.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think there's a lot here that the closer we get to it, I think I'm going to like this matchup more and more for the Eagles.
The one thing I remember about that game, Scott, Grayson's grades, Scott Grayson from Fox 29, Grayson's grades after every Eagles game. Zach Baun got an A+, and we were like, is this guy like an all-pro player that nobody – he had 15 tackles, 2 sacks, and a tackle for loss. That was really his coming out party was that night, Zach Baun. Remember that first game of the year? He was all over the place. And when you think about Green Bay, Josh Jacobs is their big back. He was their big guy in the offseason. He had 16 carries for 84 yards in the game. We'll see that matchup. But remember, Zach Baun had a monster day that day. And you just said it. They did not have Cooper DeJean that night. Avonte Maddox started that game and played a whole bunch there. So Baun, that was his first game. No Cooper DeJean. So a lot of things have changed since Brazil. Sao Paulo's where it started. Philadelphia is where it will come back to. And they will play this game in Philly this Sunday right here on 97.3 ESPN. All right, Scott, we will take a look back at Grayson's grades for Eagles-Packers next Monday. Thanks, bud.
All right, you got it, Mike. Take care.
All right, Scott Grayson's grades after every Eagles game at 97.3 ESPN.com. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, and live video streaming on the X platform, YouTube and Instagram at Mike Gill Show. Today's a great day for the video portion of the show. We see a ton of people watching today. Obviously, with the snow, not a lot of people driving around, but we're glad that you can still consume the product. And don't forget, you can listen on the free mobile app, thanks to First Bank of Sea Isle City. This hour is brought to you by Broadlee's Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning, your trusted source for heating, plumbing service, and installation for generations. Call 609-390-3907. Online, broadlees.net. Nick Sirianni is coming to the podium momentarily, and when he does, you'll hear him here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. I'm Mike Gill. Coming up, Nick Sirianni, the Eagles head coach, his day after presser. We'll get the latest on Jalen Hurts. Stick around. All right, 326. We'll get to Nick Sirianni in just a second. Grayson's grades. We just talked to Scott Grayson. We'll grade out the Eagles-Packers game. Yesterday's an incomplete. Tanner McKee, he gave an A to. Kind of an incomplete type of day. Sports Bass Live, 97.3 ESPN. It's brought to you this hour by Broadley's Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning, your trusted source for heating, plumbing, service, and installation. 609-390-3907. We'll get to Nick Sirianni and his post-game press conference comments. Some of the things we want to hear about, obviously, is Jalen Hurts and him moving forward. What's that going to look like? We'll get to Nick here on the Sports Bass Live on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, and live video streaming on the X platform, YouTube, at Mike Gill Show. Here's head coach Nick Sirianni.
Hey, Coach, thanks for taking the time today.
Thanks, Shane.
I'll do the Dallas one.
We'll start with Geoff, and then we'll go to Chris.
Yeah, Nick, I know you wanted to get Dallas some reps there in the last game, but what does he bring to the run game when you get him back?
Yeah, physical blocker. It does the things that you need your tight end to do, being able to hold the point, being on the front side, very athletic on the back side. Just able to do a lot of different things and be multiple. You can be multiple in your schemes with him in there. And so that's what makes, Dallas, obviously Dallas is very a big playmaker when the ball's in his hands. We saw that, the return of him yesterday. But what makes him a complete tight end is his ability to block in all the different schemes that he can do. So that's big to get him back for both the run and the pass game.
We'll go to Chris and then Brooks.
Afternoon, Nick. And a lot of guys in the locker room said that they saw that the Packers are a different team than they were toward the end of the season as opposed to early in the season. As you guys are developing this game plan, what do you see that's different from the Packers?
Yeah, still obviously early on in our stages of scouting them, but people, teams develop and teams, from game one to game, where we are now, 18. Everyone's a different team. Some teams have different players because of injuries. Schemes. You start to get used to what you're good at, what you're not good at. So everybody is in a different mode than they were, week one. Now, obviously, there's things that are staples that are good for, have been good for them, that have been good for us, that remain the same. But, there's a lot of changes and a lot of differences. I just see at the end of the day, though, I see a really well-coached, fundamentally sound football team. And with a lot of really good football players, a lot of really solid football players on that roster. It's a really good football team that we're playing here on Sunday.
We'll go to Brooks and then Dave.
Kind of following up about that, they were the first to see your offense with Saquon. How much do you feel like they know who you are? And, how much do you think towards Saquon that, they're prepared for on the second go-around?
Yeah, again, team's different from when we played, week one till now. A lot of things have changed. A lot of things, both teams. So I can't answer what they think there or how they think there. I know they'll be paying attention to Saquon like everybody else that we play pays attention to him. So again, got a lot of respect for how they've coached their defense. A lot of good guys out there. Number 52 is outstanding player. 93. They got players at number 7. They got players at every level. 25's a playmaker. Xavier McKinney, obviously we know him well. Big time playmaker who can take the football away. Who's done a good job of that against us. And so they got some special guys on that, and I think they're really well coached.
We'll go to Dave and then Martin.
Hey, Nick, with the way Tanner's played the last couple of weeks and with Kenny's injury, any thought to making Tanner the backup as you enter the playoffs?
Got a lot of confidence in both the guys. I think, when Kenny's had to play, he's played really well. When Tanner's had to play, he's played really well. And so, we got a really good room. Obviously, Jalen has had an outstanding season. So we just have a great room. Credit to Howie and his staff of, getting these guys in here, and then just a great job by these guys and taking advantage of their opportunities, and, great job by Kellen, Kevin, Doug, helping these guys develop. And so we feel really, really good about the room of where we are.
We'll go to Martin and then John.
Hey, Nick. A little bit along those lines. I mean, obviously you played a lot of backups, reserves yesterday and everything. Did any of them stand out? And in particular, like, a guy like Jahan Dotson, who's been a third wide receiver this year, hasn't really gotten a lot of targets. Does a game like this help him going into the playoffs?
Yeah, I think anytime you have you build on your performances, and really we really pride ourselves in that we're going to get better from every performance that we have. Win, lose, play good, play bad. But yeah, I mean, anytime you go out and play a solid game and play well, it's going to give you some confidence to move on to the next one. And so Jahan played really good, really had played a really good game. Was good in and out of the breaks, caught the ball really clean, had some moments with the ball in his hands on yards after the catch. I think one thing that we've really enjoyed about Jahan is that, he came in here and just, fit right in with the rest of the guys, just playing tough and playing physical. He's scrappy out there, and he's been scrappy since the day he's got here, even when he's affecting the game, even when he's not touching the football. So it's good to see him get his hands on the ball yesterday and do the things that he could do yesterday. That was exciting to see, and I know we're going to need him to make plays throughout the postseason. And this will be a big game for all of us this weekend.
We'll go to John and then Ruben.
Afternoon, Nick. Now that you're past week 18, a lot of people say, hey, treat it like a preseason game, but you don't have 90 guys. So some got to rest, some had to dress, some had to play. Now that you're past it, how do you think the guys handled that, especially the ones that did have to play? Yeah, I think they took advantage of their opportunity to play to get better. Again, you couldn't rest everybody. That's just the way. Again, like you said, you don't have 90 guys on the team to be able to do that. I thought Jordan Davis, went out and played one of his best games that he's had here as an Eagle. He was outstanding. I think there was a lot of guys that had really outstanding. Like Oren Burks had 17 tackles. I mean, that's incredible. Sidney made a huge play that sealed the game. Isaiah had a huge return. All those different things. We got a lot of contributions from a lot of different. I thought the offensive line played great. All those guys across the whole line. Jack Driscoll, DK, had some really good performances. And we know Tanner played a really solid game. And so you got a lot of performances from a lot of different guys, and as you see, the guys I named are a lot of different, some were backups, some are rotational players, some are starters, all those guys that I just mentioned. And so it took everybody's contribution, and everybody put everything they had into that game to get ourselves that win and to play to our standard of how we want to play football. So, Millen Williams played really good. Like, just a lot of different guys that have different roles on this football team that went out and busted their butts. I think that says a lot about our guys.
I'll go to Ruben and then Zach.
Hey, Nick. I was wondering if you could kind of outline some of the things Vic was able to do this year to turn the defense around with a lot of new pieces, a lot of guys who hadn't played before, rookies, guys at new positions, and it all came together pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think Vic he works his butt off and is constantly trying to find new ways to help, his defensive scheme get better. And then, I think he just does such a good job of holding everybody to, accountable to, how he wants it to look. He's got a great vision of how he wants it to look and how he sees it. He holds people accountable to that, and I think he calls a great game. I think he goes in there and he's got so much experience calling games. He's just got a great feel for it. And I love that, we talk about scheme, but then Vic's so obsessed too with the fundamentals of how
how you tackle, how you get off blocks. I love his tackling meeting on Saturday nights, where he's going over all the different ways that these guys run the football, how we're going to have to tackle the things that can present problems, and goes through all that detail there. Just a ton of experience and great detailed coach that has had a lot of success in this league, and obviously we've had a lot of success this year, and he's just done a great job of coaching these guys, coaching the coaches on our staff, and coaching the guys, and it's been a great group effort on that defensive side of the football.
Thank you.
We'll go to Zach and then Bo.
Hey, good afternoon, Nick. I'll ask the Jalen question today. As you put the game plan together, is it with the intention of Jalen as the starting quarterback this weekend?
Yeah, I have no new information for you guys. Like I said yesterday, he's progressing through the protocol.
Are you able to say if he's in the building today?
I got no new info for you guys here today. I'm sorry.
Thanks, Nick.
We have time for 2 more, so we'll go to Bo and then Olivia.
Hey, Nick, I'm just curious why you went to Braden on kickoffs yesterday after Jake the week prior.
Yeah, every situation calls for something different. And as you saw, Jake kicked off a couple as well. And so there's a lot of different factors that go into it. Haven't decided who was doing it, and in the playoffs against Green Bay, we'll see, and everything will be accounted for. I think at the end of the day, though, we have 2 guys that we feel are very capable. Obviously, don't ever want a penalty. I believe that was our only penalty of the day yesterday. I was kind of hoping we didn't have any penalties yesterday. But a lot of confidence in both guys, but we can't make that mistake of kicking it out of bounds there.
We'll end with Olivia here.
Hey, Nick, this is, of course, your 4th trip to the postseason with the Eagles as head coach. I'm curious, what, if anything, did you learn from your other 3 trips that you'll use to inform the way that you approach this upcoming postseason trip, whether, it's for things that you like that you did in the past, or things that maybe you learned from that you didn't like as much?
Sure. I think after every situation you go through, you make notes, and you try to go through what you did well, what you didn't do well. I think at the end of the day, is the higher the stakes get, as we get into single elimination football, the more you got to stay committed to the things you've done on a daily basis to get 14 wins. I think that's been my biggest thing, is like, all right, what can you do different here and now, or not? And it's not even different, and it always comes back to what got you here, right? What got you here? What got you 14 wins? That doesn't mean you're not looking to improve on the things that you can do better at. Which is exactly what we're doing, and trying to shore up every single thing we possibly can. But what are the core things that got you to this situation? And when everybody's talking about, single elimination football, what happens this? Well, what happens in 3 weeks if you do this or that? Blah, 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 that we stay committed to completely what we're doing. It's what we've tried to do all year, and that's the point, right? Is what's gotten you to the number 2 seed in the NFC with the NFC East title? Stick to those principles. Tough, detailed together, and really, double, triple, quadruple down on those things.
Thanks for the time, Coach.
There's Nick Sirianni, the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, right here on 97.3 ESPN. Thanks to our friends at NBC Sports Philadelphia for that. And a couple things you heard there we'll talk about on the other side. There's obviously, I got 4 notes that stand out from that presser. I mean, it's the day after a win on a game where you had a lot of backups playing, but there were 4 things that stood out to me in that. What stood out to you guys out there? 609-403-0973 on the text board. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash. Something that stood out to me. There's 4 things, but the main thing I'll give you on the other side. Busy day today. We're looking at the NFL playoff matchups and everything, too. That's all coming up next. We'll recap Sirianni's presser and give you my thoughts on all the matchups in the NFL playoffs next on the Sports Bash. 346 on Mike Gill. All right, couple highlights from Nick Sirianni. 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. By the way, it is a Monday. We are not live at the Fanatics Sportsbook today. We will be back there probably on Wednesday. With the snow today, we just felt it was probably a little bit better if we just hung in the studio today. Thanks for everybody who's watching the show on the YouTube channel, at Mike Gill Show on YouTube. You can watch on your big screen TV at home. You can watch on Instagram. You can watch on the X platform. We appreciate everybody that. If you want to listen on the free mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City, you can do that as well. All right, here's my takeaways from Nick Sirianni and his press conference today. He was asked about Tanner McKee being the backup. Word salad answer. Confidence in both. Feel good with where we are. Translation, we might think about it. I don't want to give you an answer right now. I don't think that here's a question. If Jalen Hurts couldn't play, was not cleared, who starts?
I'm assuming it's Pickett because I think Pickett has a better grasp of the offense.
Why? I mean, McKee's been here longer.
Yeah, but we saw yesterday McKee was, you said it earlier, Mike, he's literally running the same play half the game. So if you have a guy running the same play again and again, or variations of the same play, that means you're not trusting him with the full playbook.
He said he had confidence in both, feel good with where we're at there. That one stood out to me because I did make me think, if Hurts could not play. Now, that's another highlight. No new info today. Is he in the building? I have no new info today. He is so non-committal on the Hurts stuff.
I was going to say yesterday he was so ticked off at the reporter who said to him, well, there was a report that came out that Hurts was at the walkthrough on Saturday. And, like, the look on his face yesterday was just like, bleep you, man. Like,
yeah, like, where are you getting this information, man? Like, no, I think he's more like, bleep that guy who gave you the information.
Right, bleep that guy.
No new info on Hurts today. I mean, he is trying his hardest to be like, oh, Kenny Pickett might play. Nope, it might be Tanner McKee.
So stupid.
Yeah, I know we'll talk to McMullen about that tonight. He asked a question that did stand out to me because Sirianni saw what I saw. He saw Jordan Davis played one of the best games he's ever played. I agree. I thought Jordan Davis was awesome for the quarter that he played yesterday. He was all over the place.
I would argue that's the best game of his life.
I said 90 is all over the place. 90 was everywhere yesterday.
Every play he was on the field, he was involved in the play.
The last thing that stood out to me was somebody asked, and I noticed this yesterday too. He went back to Braden Mann as the kicker yesterday, who proceeded to kick one out of bounds. What is the kicking situation and how confident are they in the kickoffs and in the field goals? Because Jake Elliott did miss a field goal yesterday that was a pretty makeable one.
Yes. And they let him go out there later in the game. They took Braden Mann off the kickoffs, put Elliott out there, and there was no, like, hey, we're going to do it at halftime. No, they did it halfway through the second half. Like, they gave Braden Mann one more shot at it, and then they sent Elliott out there.
So those were the four things that kind of stood out to me about Nick Sirianni's presser today, that he has confidence in both. But I'm not sure now if you're watching the show on the YouTube channel, as many people are today. Broad Street Sports is watching, says it will be Pickett because of experience, but I do think McKee is more comfortable in the pocket than Pickett is. So I want McKee, but it won't happen. I also thought McKee showed a lot of poise in the pocket. He was very matter-of-factly, I guess, if you will, like stepping up. He didn't rush. I did think McKee looked very poised yesterday. He didn't rush anything. He just kind of side-swiped some guys and then stepped his way up. Look, I'm not the biggest Kenny Pickett fan in the world, so if you told me Jalen Hurts can't play, I wouldn't mind playing McKee. I'm also not going to go overboard here and tell you this guy is the second coming. I've seen the A.J. Feely experiments where he goes in, plays well, gets traded, and then goes someplace else and can't play.
Yeah, I mean, you'll have Geoff Mosher coming on with you in about 10 minutes, Mike, and he talked about in the Inside the Birds pod how he saw some definitive differences between first half McKee and second half McKee. And I saw the same thing in the third quarter where there were moments where he was trying to do stuff and you could tell he was a little bit like, Well, that's not working anymore. I was able to do that in the first half, but not in the second half.
Our buddy Geoff is watching on the, looks like the X platform today. He says, give me a third round for Tanner. I'll take it. You know, I do want to get into this a little bit more, Geoff. I want to stress, I'm not advocating to try to trade Tanner McKee. What I am advocating is you have to get value when you have a luxury. Tanner McKee right now is a luxury. He's your third quarterback. So some people are saying, well, he's better than Pickett. He's your third quarterback. He's not your second quarterback. So some people are saying, then trade Pickett and keep McKee. That sounds great. I just don't think other teams value Pickett. So if they value McKee, that's the guy that you trade. It's not Mike Gill wants to trade McKee because he thinks, no. I'm just looking at value. My quarterback is Jalen Hurts. I don't have a third quarterback to sit there if someone's going to hand me a third-round pick. The Eagles have shown time and time again that they can find a third quarterback or a second quarterback. And therefore, I don't need a third quarterback if you're going to give me a third-round pick. Now, if you're going to give me a seventh-round pick, I'll keep McKee. If you're going to give me a sixth-round pick, I'll keep McKee. But if you're going to overpay for him, I have to trade him. It's a luxury that I can no longer. You have now twisted my arm to say, I want your luxury. I want it. Here's what I'm going to do to display that I want your luxury. I'm giving you a overvalued pick in the draft. A third-round pick would be overvaluing Tanner McKee. So the Eagles would have. Now, the difference is, I don't think anyone's offering you a third-round pick for Kenny Pickett.
And they're not offering it because, as Scott Grayson said a little bit earlier in the hour, Mike, he said, look, teams have seen 24, 25, 26 games of Pickett in the league. They've only seen 2 to Tanner McKee. So they have said, hey, we know what Pickett is. We don't know what Tanner McKee's upside
And we
is.
know that everybody wants what's behind door number 2. And they say, look, what we saw behind door number 1, we liked a lot. What's behind door number 2? We want to be the team that takes that shot. Look, I understand he looked pretty efficient with the football yesterday. They didn't really open the playbook a whole heck of a lot.
No.
They didn't ask him to do a whole heck of a lot. He did a fake bootleg, rolled out, and threw the ball into the flat. How many times yesterday? 50?
Seems like it.
Every play. I said, this is the offense they should be running for Jalen Hurts. Let him run the rollout and throw the ball to the tight end in the flat 12 times. That's a play that I would like to see. There's the only time I ever saw Dallas Goedert one-on-one where he was basically wide open. All right, Football at 4 is on the other side. Geoff Mosher is here today. We'll talk to him about his thoughts on the Eagles' win, the playoff matchup, and the storylines leading up to Eagles and Packers. If Jalen Hurts didn't play, would it be Tanner McKee or would it be Kenny Pickett? Does Kenny Pickett or Tanner McKee have any value? These are, to me, what came out of that game yesterday. The Eagles asked Tanner McKee to throw the ball 41 times so that they could show other teams, hey, overpay us for this guy. We're daring you to. That's next. This is the Sports Bash. The Eagles will take on the Green Bay Packers right here on your home for Eagles football, 97.3 ESPN. Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary. At Bet365, Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast. InsideTheBirds.com is here. The Eagles beat the Giants yesterday. Insignificant to this conversation, the Eagles will face the Green Bay Packers, just like they opened the season. This time, if someone loses, they are going home. We'll bring in Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast right now for another edition of Football at 4 on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. There he is, Geoff Mosher, one of the creators of InsideTheBirds.com, and he joins us now as the Eagles win yesterday. Initial takeaway, obviously, from a lot of people is Tanner McKee, and he played well yesterday. You know Eagles fans, man, they're already saying, you got to stick with Tanner McKee. Nick was asked about him today. What did you think about Tanner McKee that stood out in the game? Because I think the bigger question is if Jalen Hurts could not play or got hurt, is that where the Eagles have a decision to make?
No, Mike, they don't have a decision to make. Their backup is Kenny Pickett, and Tanner McKee did look nice. I think you're right that sometimes, because it's the backup or the third stringer and you see something different or good, you get very excited about it. I mean, he did throw, he did not put the ball in harm's way. That was good. He completed 66% of his passes. That's great. I mean, he put 20 points on the board. So let's not go and, go crazy over it. He had 2 nice touchdown passes. I thought the usage is what stood out, Mike. My takeaway is that they got him going early on and got him to be able to get the ball quickly to wide receivers who were open by putting him under center and working a lot of play action and boots, right? And that's a lot of what the Kellen Moore offense has looked like in the past. So that it was an interesting development. I felt like when the Eagles passed the ball early in the downs on 1st and 10, on 2nd and short, they were successful. But when the Eagles were behind the sticks at times, or when it was 3rd and long, when the Giants could get a pass rush, you did see Tanner McKee throw the ball a little low or a little high or a little off target. So his mobility is better than as advertised out of Stanford, where he's kind of considered a statue. He obviously can move in and out of the pocket well enough to do some of those rollouts. But he also, like most quarterbacks who have only started a little bit on 3rd down or 2nd and long, when they're in passing situations, he looks a little bit different in that regard. So obviously it's a very, very small sample size, but this is a kid that the Eagles clearly like. He's played well when given the opportunity. And I'm sure next year he'll be given a shot to win that backup job. But for right now, for this year, the reality is if you don't have Jalen Hurts, you're probably not going to go very far in the playoffs anyway. But Kenny Pickett will be the backup.
Yeah, I actually saw what you saw. I was at the game yesterday and tweeted out at one point, I like to see this type of play call for Jalen Hurts. There was a lot of little bootleg, bringing the tight end across the back. They ran that play 15 times yesterday, and there's Dallas Goedert wide open. Now, I get it. You don't have A.J. Brown and you don't have Devontae Smith as options, so you're trying to manufacture ways to get guys the ball. And, hey, Goddard's my best weapon on this day while he was in the game. They found ways to get him the ball. But I love that little play they ran with him a bunch. They got Dotson involved in the game. I guess the big question will be, we've seen Howie Roseman end this playbook a lot. Are teams going to call the Eagles and overpay for Tanner McKee? I don't think Kenny Pickett has any value. So people will keep saying, trade Pickett, keep McKee. I'm wondering if they threw the ball 41 times with him yesterday to see if anybody would overpay like they did for A.J. Feely, like they did for Kevin Cobb in the past.
Yeah, I doubt it, honestly. Feely had 4 games under his belt when they and success there. Tanner McKee has basically started 1 game in the NFL. So I don't see that being the case. I know that it's a weaker quarterback class, and would maybe a team try to call Tanner McKee to bring him in to compete, but mostly be a backup. But the Eagles don't want to get rid of him because they see him as a cost-efficient backup. And if they're able to say trade Kenny Pickett next year coming out of camp or maybe this offseason, whatever, then maybe then the opportunity is for them to get what they want, which is to have McKee be their very low-cost backup.
Geoff Mosher's here. Yeah, I agree. Listen, I mean, low cost for McKee, and I'm just saying, if somebody called and knocked your socks off, there's too much of a luxury to say, no, we want him to be our guy. If someone said, I'll give you a third-round pick for that kid, they'd be packing his bags, don't you think?
Yeah, of course, but I'd be stunned off my rocking chair if
Well, that's where I think we differ a little bit. I think teams are so desperate. They see a kid who just was efficient, like, hey, for a third-round pick, we'll take our shot with somebody. But we'll see. That's neither here nor there. Jalen Hurts, non-committal. No new info today. But, Jeff Mosher, he will play on Sunday, correct?
Well, I can't definitively say he'll play Sunday because I don't know, and I don't think anybody ever does with concussion protocol. Your response to activity is important. So we know that he took part in the walkthrough on Saturday. So that's part of advancing from stage 3 to stage 4. But so then he'll need more activity, team stuff that he'll be able to do now. And then they'll practice tomorrow. They'll practice on Wednesday. Yeah. But I'm with you in that I think he's on track to be able to practice and play, but without knowing how his response is from that walkthrough or a day or two later. So to your point, barring any unforeseen symptoms that pop up between whenever he was, that Saturday and they practice Wednesday, yeah, then you would assume he'll be on track.
Yeah, obviously, because you do have the people out there that are like, he hasn't played in a couple of weeks, you see McKee play one game. People want to stick with that. That's what got you there. But look, to win the Super Bowl, you need Jalen Hurts, and you need him playing at his highest level. Give me something you remember from week 1 in this matchup that would excite you in this matchup if you're an Eagles fan. Hey, you're playing Green Bay. You got some Eagles fans saying, man, this Green Bay team's pretty good. You got to play them in the wild card game. If you go back to week 1, what's something that the Eagles were able to do that you should say, they were able to do this, and that's why they should win this game?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, if I recall, they came out of half and sprung a big play to A.J. Brown. And I know that the Packers, if Jair Alexander, his health is always an issue. And if he doesn't play, the Packers aren't nearly the same. They're still good, but they're not the same. And obviously they just lost Christian Watson. So they're already reeling a little bit, but they got a big play in that game, if I recall, to A.J. Brown. Look, the Barkley wheel route was a great play and a great design and everything, but I can't sit there and say that's going to be open all the time. And when we broke down that play with Greg Cosell on Inside the Tape, the linebacker, I think it was McDuffie is his name, was so close to getting it. Inches. It's a game of inches, and that ball was an inch of being complete. So that you don't know if you can spring on the Packers again. But A.J. Brown was 5 of 119 for a touchdown. Devontae Smith had 84 yards. I remember they went for it late on a 3rd and 8 to ice the game and got it. So I do think they can throw the ball on Green Bay, assuming but I think they can throw the ball. That's why, as long as everything's good. And then the other takeaway, Mike, I just remember from that game, while the Eagles were not very good at that time in pass defense and defensively, they had a couple of turnovers, and their response to turnover in that game was really good. If I recall, they had a bunch of low red zone or mid red zone stops and made the Packers had to settle early for a couple of field goals. The Packers were up 6-0 in that game on 2 Narvison field goals because they couldn't get touchdowns. They were chip shot field goals, but the red zone defense was good.
One guy who did not play in that game was Cooper DeJean. How has his return changed their defense from the opener to what the defense that we've now seen?
Oh, in so many ways. It's hard to say that one person can change an entire defense, and I won't go that far, but he's changed a lot of what they can do defensively for Vic Fangio. We saw Avonte Maddox trouble covering, trouble tackling, right? So right away, Cooper DeJean, and we've seen it all throughout the year, good tackler, good coverage guy, plays up on guys in the slot, blitzes from the slot. So he gives you added developments in your zone pressures that Vic Fangio likes to do, where he brings 4, but he drops, an outside linebacker and he rushes either a nickel or a linebacker. Cooper DeJean has been a part of that. So he just can give you so many different levels of productivity that you weren't getting from Avonte Maddox, beyond the obvious of just being better at tackler, better at covering, and just more speed and dynamic athletic ability.
He's different. It was also the first game we ever saw Zach Bond, and boy, has he changed the dynamics of this team, man. That night, I think he had 15 tackles, 2 sacks, a tackle for loss, and you think back to that first game, we were laughing. We're like, do the Eagles have like an all-pro player? Or are we missing something here? What has he meant to this defense, and how important he is in a game like this with Josh Jacobs?
Very important. He's meant everything to the defense. He's probably, outside of Jalen Carter, the most important player on the defense. He's earned it. He has done far better than anybody, including Vic Fangio, who has admitted this, could have expected. And you're going to play that. He's as important in this game against the Packers because the Packers, sort of like the Eagles, are foundationally built to be balanced and to run the ball a lot, and they run the ball well with Josh Jacobs. And if you're going to need your best run stoppers, so Nakobe Dean and Zach Bowen, of course, have been very good against the run all year long. They've been pretty good against the pass too. I would say better against the run, and that's what they're going to have to do to attack this Packers offense is stop Josh Jacobs.
I was at the game yesterday. One guy who stood out to me was number 90, and I'm thinking, 90? Why is 90 playing? Nick Sirianni said today, Jordan Davis, one of the best games he's ever seen him play. I agree. He was all over the place yesterday. If they could get that version of Jordan Davis, man, I'd be pretty darn pumped up about what he brings to the table there. But Green Bay, they can run, they can throw. But Jordan Davis, I thought, was a big part of the game yesterday as well. I wasn't as thrilled with Bryce Huff. He seemed insignificant, had a rough day. They were just blasting him. I kept routinely seeing that poor guy 5 to 7 yards blown off the ball there. So those were two kind of takeaways from guys that I kept my eye on because they're going to be factors in the game. I would imagine Huff is not a factor. Davis likely is.
Yeah, Davis will be a factor because he's going to have to play. I mean, he is a starter in their 5-man fronts. Now, I'm not falling for the banana in the tailpipe. If the Eagles could play against the Giants' offensive line every week, of course, Jordan Davis would probably have dominant games the way he did, but they're not. They're playing the Packers offensive line. And for the most part this year, Jordan Davis has been somewhat of a flash player who has also shown you not great snaps. And listen, that's why in a game where reserves are mostly playing, Jordan Davis played 40% of the snaps. I mean, Vic Fangio is telling you that he thinks Jordan Davis needs more work, needs more snaps. Also, that he's, if Jordan Davis had played in the game, plays in the game against the Giants and unfortunately suffers an injury, Vic Fangio doesn't think that the Eagles defense suddenly, goes out the window, or else he wouldn't have played that much. So he'll have to play well against the Packers because the Packers run the ball, but the Packers have a really good offensive line. So you hope that he gives you one of those flash games.
One thing about Tanner McKee's game that was so efficient was he found Dallas Goedert. Give me your thoughts on Goedert, his role yesterday, and then what he means coming back. I mean, I feel like Calcaterra, was efficient, was fine, but how much different is the Eagles' offense with, if at all, in your mind with Goedert? He'll be back for the game, and, they got him involved a lot early.
Yeah, first of all, let me just say how surprised I was. Well, not that he played, because it was really the day before when they activated him to the 53-man roster. I figured they would save that spot to sign like another defensive tackle or a running back, Ty Davis Price. But they clearly did it because they wanted Goedert to knock the rust off, which I think was a risk. And listen, it worked out for them. So they got him the work. But did Dallas Goedert really need that? I mean, he's a veteran player in this league. You lost CJ Uzama earlier last week to injured reserve. So your only backups right now are Grant Calcaterra and EJ Jenkins. EJ Jenkins is not going to play in a playoff game intentionally. Okay. I mean, he may not have to now if they're in 13 personnel or jumbo or something, but that's not a guy that they want on the field. So to risk getting Dallas Goedert re-injured in that game just to knock some cobwebs off, to me, I'm not sure the reward was worth the risk. However, he went out there, made some plays, looked like Dallas Goedert. And to answer your question, Mike, there are times this year, it's not been a great year for Dallas, but you go back to the Saints game, he's still a weapon. And there are times this year where he can hurt you in the pass game, and we know he's a good blocker in the run game. And they've struggled a little bit at times with Grant Calcaterra on the edges having a block. So getting him back is key for their offense, not just from the passing game, but for the completeness of the offense.
Yep. I was a little surprised that he played and then that they got him. I was like, man, they really are trying to just, they were feeding him the ball early in that game. And him and McKee, there was that one drive, 15 yards, 17 yards. It resulted in a touchdown to Anais Smith there. The other factor in this game, Let me get your take on the kicking situation. Not only the kicker, the kickoffs. I mean, that's something there. I saw that Penn State twist and turn there. I think that's something that definitely Sirianni's going to be thinking about come playoff time for any kick in like the 48 to 52-yard range where that was second nature for them.
Well, Mike, the one thing that I think would really drive fans crazy, I mean, you never like to lose in the playoffs or the Super Bowl, but you go back to 2 years ago, and I mean, the Eagles had to carry two different punters on their 53-man into the Super Bowl, and neither of them were very good. And obviously the game turned on the Kadarius Toney punt return that set up the touchdown that I think was the go-ahead touch, or either the game tying or go-ahead touchdown. I forget at this point what it was, but it was a significant point. And you just never want to end your season end, especially in the Super Bowl, because of special teams. But if you're looking at one area right now where you're really concerned, it's the kicking game with Jake Elliott, which no one's ever had that concern in a long time, right? And then also Braden Mann's punting is fine. He's a good punter. He's doing a good job, but he's doing kickoffs, and 2 times now he's done a kickoff and that has not, that's gone out of bounds and given the offense good field position. I think I would go back to Jake Elliott on the kickoffs if I was a little concerned there, but special teams has to be a concern at this point.
Yeah, I agree with you there. The kickoffs, kicking out of bounds, and they flip kickers. They switched kickers last week. They went back to the kicker this week. They flipped him again. And I definitely think that changes the way you coach the game if you're not confident in your kicker. And he missed another one yesterday that was pretty makeable for Jake Elliott there. I want to get your take on, in your mind, is there any scenario that Nick Sirianni loses this game that he's in trouble?
No. I mean, I suppose if they lose, so I've been trying to think about this. If they lose something like, I don't know, 38-10, right? What's that going to look like? It's probably going to look like the Eagles turn the ball over a lot. Not that I can't imagine the defense is just going to give up 38 points to this Packers team and they're going to get killed because they're so ineffective defensively and so ineffective offensively. Usually when you get blown out or it's lopsided, it's because you turn the ball over, and that stuff just happens sometimes. I hate to say it, but it's true. So that's the only way I could see even Nick's job being in jeopardy is if they lose by like 21 or more points to the Packers at home. It's going to be very disappointing. But again, I think for that to happen, there would probably be some flukish element to it of turnover that you can't just sit there and say, well, the head coach made a bad call there. The head coach made a bad call there.
What does losing Watson mean to them?
I don't want to say not as much as we would think, but they've got really good receivers who can run, but none like Watson. He can really stretch a defense vertically like few in the league can. He's that good. But what the Packers are this year and what they've been, is more of I don't want to call them dink and dunk. They're just more of a balanced team. They run the ball a whole lot with Josh Jacobs. They're kind of like the Eagles in that regard. Run the ball a whole lot. They work the middle of the field with Dobbs, with Wicks, with their tight end who's fantastic, Tucker Kraft, right? And they throw the ball to Josh Jacobs. They don't throw the ball very deep often, and not because Watson has been hurt a lot. Yes, that's true, but because it just doesn't seem to be a staple of what Matt LaFleur is doing with this offense, right? So while it is a loss because a guy like that can give you that 1 or 2 catches that changes a game, to me, it's not the worst loss in the world. Like there are other if they lost Josh Jacobs, I tell you they were done. And even some other receivers like Kraft or Dobbs who are a little bit more impactful on a snap-to-snap basis, I'd say, man, that's really rough to overcome.
Yeah,
but they can overcome the loss of him.
The one thing I will say is he caught the touchdown in the first game, and I agree with you on his ability to stretch the field like other guys can. But with him not there, it allows the Eagles to put more attention on Reed, and he was the guy that got them in the first game. He had the big game against them. But if you're not worried about where Watson is, I can put more attention to Reed and have a little bit better understanding of where he is. And look, the Eagles' defense is way different from the first night to this night. Mitchell, much more savvy. DeJean, not there the first night. Communication probably much better than it was in week 1 against the Packers in Brazil.
Yeah, well, let me tell you something about Jaden Reed. He's his role in the offense has been sort of enigmatic because since November 17th, he's had one game over 48 yards. Right, he was 3 for 76 against New Orleans, a couple days before Christmas. But here's the stats from November 17th: 2 for 23, then 3 for 26, then 3 for 24, then 0 for 0, then 5 for 34, 376, 248. So he still gives you some big playability. You see that when you're like 2 of 48, like he was against the Bears here. But he's taken a back seat to Kraft. Kraft and Dobbs have become far more impactful and consistent. Kraft has been really, really good for them. And they drafted the other tight end in the second round thinking Musgrave was going to be the guy, but Kraft has been good. So I don't know what that means for this game. As far as you're right, Jaden Reed tore him up in the first half like he was tearing up a lot of teams. He had 139 against Minnesota earlier this year, 113 against Detroit. So he can always pop up. But the way the Packers play, that's not the number one guy right now to me that I think you're concerned about. I think the running back, Kraft, and Dobbs are the three guys. And then there's this wild card with Dontavian Wicks. And I guess you could throw Reed and Wicks in this boat where if it's a close game, one of those two guys can make a play to beat you. They are deep. I'll give the Packers this. I don't think they're as talented as the Eagles. Clearly not. They don't have an A.J. Brown. They don't have a Devontae Smith. But they are 1 through 5 deeper in pass catchers than the Philadelphia Eagles are.
Real quick, some news in the NFC East. Mike McCarthy. He's going to interview with the Chicago Bears. He is not fired. His contract has expired next week. So he will interview with the Chicago Bears. Joe Shane and Brian Daboll with the Giants, they both will be back. So the NFC East, at least two, are going through some transition right now. The Giants will bring back their coach and GM. The Dallas Cowboys, we do not know yet, but Mike McCarthy will interview with the Bears. How about that, Geoff Mosher?
How about that? Also, Mike, have you guys talked about yet the Eagles' schedule for next year?
Brought this up last week. Brutal.
Oh, my. This is even worse than last year. The whole gauntlet that they had from Buffalo to San Fran and Kansas City. Oh, well, man.
They play Kansas City. They play Buffalo. They play Detroit. They play Minnesota. They got
the Rams, the Bucks, the Chargers. Geez. And the Commanders are probably going to be pretty good again next year. Wow.
Yes. And, they got Buffalo. They got Tampa Bay, who they seemingly always play now. So Tampa Bay, Buffalo is the cross game. So they got kind of the worst situation there. Kansas City. And the road games, too. They've got like 6 road games that are just brutal next year.
Yeah, man. So better. You know what they say? Even Dan Campbell said this last year about the Lions. Now, he proved to be, I don't want to say wrong, but he said, you just never know if you're going to get back. The Lions are great. We'll see if they get back to the conference championship. But you got to take care of your opportunities when you get them.
Yeah, and by the way, if the Eagles are to win this game, Tampa Bay is the most likely opponent in the divisional round. So you could go from Green Bay to Tampa Bay. You could play the Rams, and you could play Minnesota. You cannot play Washington.
So you think Tampa Bay is likely to beat Minnesota? I know they're favored. I just think that Minnesota is more likely to win that game.
I kind of like Tampa, man. At home.
I'll give you that. You're right. It's a good game. There's something weird about Tampa. Like they were struggling the last 2 weeks to win the game. Well, no, 2 weeks ago they blew them out. But you thought that they were going to handle the Saints.
I think that game last night took Minnesota's soul.
They did look frustrated, didn't they?
They got embarrassed. They got that was one of those things like, we're going to show you that you can't win with your quarterback, and we're going to do it on national TV. And Darnold at the end of that game looked like, man, this is why nobody believes in me. And now I get it. I get it.
Well, I just know one thing. When Tampa and Minnesota played, that means Todd Bowles versus Brian Flores. You're going to see a lot of blitzing. You're going to see a whole lot of blitzing.
The old Tampa Bay Bucks, Minnesota Vikings. That's the 4-5 game Monday night. You can hear that game on 97.3 ESPN. Geoff Mosher, the Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com. Football at 4 all week long, getting you ready for Eagles and Packers here on 97.3 ESPN. All right, Mosher, thanks, buddy.
See you, Mike.
All right, there's Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast. And, of course, Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash Live. We do it every day, 4 o'clock. Tomorrow, Adam Kaplan will give us what he's hearing about the Eagles' opponent. We'll talk to Amon Green, former Packers running back, later on in the week as well. He'll be our outside view a little bit later on this week here on the Sports Bash. I'm Mike Gill. What's up, everybody? It is a Monday edition. We are not live at the Fanatics Sportsbook at Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City, but we will be there later on this week. We're just waiting for the snow to kind of dissipate. Hey, if you're watching the show, how about hitting that subscribe button, hit that like button, smash it if you will. You can watch the show each and every day on the YouTube platform at Mike Gill Show, on the X platform at Mike Gill Show, and for those of you watching on Instagram at Mike Gill Show, you can follow along over there. We got you till 6. Coming up tonight on 97.3 ESPN, there's no Monday Night Football. But you got the Sixers and the Suns, probably the two most disappointing teams in all the league. You know why? Well, Kevin Durant got hurt, and they stink. And when Joel Embiid doesn't play, the Eagles stink. I think Embiid should play tonight, and the Sixers play the Suns tonight on 97.3 ESPN. We got Flyers and Maple Leafs tomorrow, Sixers, Washington Wednesday, and then the college football playoffs, Penn State and Notre Dame Thursday night on 97.3 ESPN. When we come back, it's another edition of Nick's Nuggets. Nick Earnshaw joins me here on the Sports Bash. At 434 Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. This hour of the show brought to you by our friends over at Jersey Cal. Well, I can't recommend ice cream on a day like today. I can recommend ice cream most days, even in the middle of January. Jersey Cal, ice cream is a year-round thing. There's a lot of snow on the ground, so the roads aren't great, but the ice cream is still fantastic. They're open every day from 12 noon to 10 p.m., and if that snow dissipates, what's better than a nice... They got some great new flavors, by the way. We were looking at the flavors yesterday. We all went to the Eagles game, and somehow it popped up on our screen, and someone said, oh, you see Jersey Cal's new flavor? Thinking about ice cream and freezing cold weather yesterday. That's how good the Jersey Cal ice cream is. All right, Nick's Nuggets from Nick Earnshaw here on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. They're brought to you by the Fanatic Sportsbook at Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City. We are not there today like we normally are on Monday, but we'll be there later this week. Nuggets joins me now on the Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN. What's going on, Nick?
Hey, Mike, how are you? Finally, another Eagles season has ended. They're in the postseason. We can all relax. We don't have to talk about the record anymore. It was Saquon Barkley. It is what it is. It is what it is at this point. I would have liked to see them play because that defense probably would have allowed 150 in half a quarter yesterday.
I don't know about that. Everybody keeps saying that. The Eagles could not run the ball yesterday. I mean, they only had people keep saying – I mean, Shipley had, 30 yards, and Gainwell didn't do anything. They did not run the ball well. That's one of the things I took away from yesterday was it wasn't like the Eagles ran the ball so efficiently that you're like, see, they got 150 yards. They only ran for like 50 yards in the game.
Well, here's the problem. They had the backup offensive line in the whole game. You had the starting offensive line. It would have been something different in my estimation.
Well, yeah, but you didn't want to play the starting offensive lineman yesterday, did you?
Not at all. Not at all. So it's good. Everyone's going into the game healthy. I know A.J. Brown was on the sideline all excited to start the game and fell asleep by the end. So that's how yesterday went, even though Tanner McKee had a nice day. We'll get to him in a little bit. But we got to start with a little bit of a breaking news nugget, Mike Gill. Starting with the Eagles coaching staff and Kellen Moore. According to Ian Rappaport of NFL Network, he has been requested by the New Orleans Saints to be interviewed for their head coaching position. Yes, Eagles offensive coordinator hasn't even been here a full season just yet because he got the playoffs coming around. He has been requested by the Saints to be interviewed for their head coaching position, according to NFL Network and Ian Rappaport. And, Mike, you know what's funny about this? It's hilarious to me. Where is the Super Bowl being held this year? In New Orleans. Where was the Super Bowl held when they lost a coordinator who was getting interviewed throughout the postseason and the Arizona Cardinals back in 2022 when the Eagles went to the Super Bowl where the host city was Arizona? So it's, I guess, maybe a good thing, a nice little omen that a coordinator is getting interviewed in the Super Bowl host city by that team. But remember how that debacle played out with Jonathan Gannon a couple years ago. But, yeah, Kellen Moore going to be interviewed by the Saints, or at least has been requested to be interviewed by the Saints.
All right, not surprising that Kellen Moore is going to get some interviews. I don't think he'll get a job in this circuit unless the Dallas job opens up, which, by the way, Mike McCarthy, he is going to interview with the Bears. Now, that doesn't mean he won't be back with the Cowboys, but he is going to go interview with the Bears because his contract is up. Kellen Moore with the Saints, they're interviewing everybody. I saw so many different names down there. None of them really jumped off the page. But Kellen Moore will be eligible to interview next week, and I'm not surprised by that at all. He's an interesting one because I don't know that anybody says, oh, man, Moore's been awesome this year. The one thing that would be is the continuity. You don't want another new offensive coordinator. Now, one opportunity would be if Shane Steichen got fired by Indianapolis, but he got retained today, so even that is not a possibility to bring Steichen back. So I would like to see Kellen Moore stay and not have to go through another offensive coordinator. But I also wasn't overly impressed with Moore this season as much as I thought I would have been.
No, I don't think most people were. You thought, oh, man, they're going to run a crazy amount of motion. This offense is going to be dynamic. Remember, early on in the season, the big meeting between the offensive line and Nick Sirianni, they wanted to run the ball again. So they had to change things up early on in the year once again and go back to what they were. So I haven't seen like a ton of that I love from Kellen Moore this year. He's been fine. He's been okay as a play caller because sometimes you're sitting there, especially the way they started games this year. Usually those plays are scripted. So, and they've had trouble starting football games this year. Remember, the Eagles have been more of a second half team. It takes them a little bit to get going throughout the year. So that's why I've been a little bit like, okay. But here's the thing. If you lose Kellen Moore, it's another year. Jalen Hurts has a new offensive coordinator. He's got to learn a whole new offense. Remember the beginning of the year, he made the comment. He had to learn, more than 90% of the new offense, He was, getting there. So I don't want Jalen Hurts to have to go through that again because that's something he's had to do since essentially college where he's learning a new offense every single time, and he can't get into a rhythm over the course of his career. It takes a little bit to get into a rhythm. He's done a great job with what he's been given, but, he's really only had Shane Steichen as an offensive play caller for a couple of years, and then he goes and takes a head coaching job. He could lose Kellen Moore once again. I don't know if that'll happen this time around, but it'd be nice to just have a guy here for at least a couple of seasons.
I agree. Yep. I would say my hope would be that he does not get hired in this cycle, but I wouldn't be shocked, but mildly surprised. I don't think he gets a job in this cycle, but I'm not surprised that he's getting interviewed by the Saints. I think the Saints are interviewing just about everybody. I mean, I saw David Shaw, the former the Stanford coach. I've seen some names all over the place that you're like, man, they're really searching far and wide to try to get this this job filled.
Yeah, it's just funny that the host city now.
Although
Super Bowl,
I will say
it's
this,
pretty fun.
Nick. I think when John Gannon got interviews a couple of years ago, people were kind of surprised, like Gannon's getting interviews, and it turned out now that first year he did not get hired, but the second year around he did get hired and got the job in Arizona. And by the way, he's now going to be going into his third season, and that team seems to be moving in the right direction.
Yeah, it's like a coordinator that Philadelphia doesn't really love. Seems like the NFL loves these coordinators. Kellen Moore has been a guy that's been around every single year. You hear his name floated in conversations of a new job, maybe a head coaching position over the course of the past couple of years. That was kind of the same thing with Gannon. You were hearing his name over a couple of years, floating around as a head coach, and we're sitting here like, really? But the NFL, or teams around the NFL, I should say, have likened these coaches to certain positions throughout the league, which is fascinating.
Yeah, fans look at
he's not loved.
Fans look at things differently though. Teams people did not like John Gannon's style of defense. They didn't blitz enough. Teams don't just look at that. They also look: are you a leader? Are you organized? Are you a guy that's in tune with every element of the team, not just the defense? All that stuff. So obviously they liked how organized and the messaging that that John Gannon had. And look, Kellen Moore, I think is just an okay. I was more excited when they hired him as opposed to what ended up becoming of the offense. I thought the offense was going to be better.
Yep, I agree. But we got to move on. Nugget number 2. We're going to stay with the Philadelphia Eagles, and this is a little bit interesting thing, Mike. So nugget number 2 regarding the Eagles front office. Remember on Friday, you and I had a long discussion regarding Howie Roseman and the New York Jets. Now, there is a story and reports coming out that Alec Hallaby, the assistant GM to Howie Roseman and the Philadelphia Eagles, is going to interview for the Jets general manager job. So they are getting as close as they can to the Philadelphia Eagles and Howie Roseman. They did it once before with their last GM and Joe Douglas. Look how that turned out. But listen, Hallaby has garnered interest before. He's been on the market. The Panthers and Commanders, I believe they were interested in him last go around. But this is another Eagles executive that teams are trying to poach. And this goes to show how Howie Roseman is just sending executives out throughout the league, but teams can't figure out what he's been able to do still, even though they're trying to poach his guys. I found this fascinating, especially since we had that conversation regarding Howie Roseman and the Jets last Friday. Now they are going to interview the assistant GM to Howie Roseman and Alec Hallaby.
Well, that's no surprise. I mean, teams have been poaching Eagles assistant GMs, and basically anybody who has shaken Howie Roseman's hand over the last 20 years is getting a job. I mean, how many different people are in this league that have been a part of the Eagles front office at some time or another? I mean, You figure every offseason, there was like when they went to the Super Bowl, I think they had like 3 or 4 different executives interviewing for a job. Catherine Raitt, she got hired by Cleveland, I think. Andrew Berry, he's in Cleveland. The guy who's with the Giants right now, the assistant GM with the Giants, he was in Philadelphia. There's a ton of them, out there. So this is not a surprise at all.
No, and Hallaby is interesting because he's a guy they kind of use as a Swiss Army knife, and he's been involved in many different departments, whether it's sports science, managing the cap, etc. He's been involved in a lot of different things. So it's no surprise that someone close to Howie Roseman's been in the Eagles organization for a while. He started as an intern. That's fascinating that they are going to go after another guy just like they did last time, who was close to Howie Roseman, his right-hand man essentially, and they're going to try this again maybe? I thought that was – I'm very curious.
Well, it's smart. By the way, Joe Douglas did a good job. They just had guys above him, the ownership group, the son. I thought Joe Douglas – first off, Joe Douglas is an interesting guy because there was, the conversation when the Eagles won the Super Bowl. We used to have people that just hated Howie Roseman. They never wanted to give him the credit, and they all said it was Joe Douglas that deserved the credit. Well, Douglas goes to the Jets, and quite frankly, that Jets team is horrible. He built that team. I don't think it's because they lack talent. What is wrong with that team? What was the problem with that team this year? I don't really have the answer. Why were they so bad? They don't have a terrible roster. I think their offensive line's still a problem, but I don't think Joe Douglas was a terrible GM there. That's why I think that, the Jets are saying, look, we'll go back to the Eagles and go get a guy who's less of a football guy and more of a cap guy, manage the money, do all that kind of stuff. Those are the way these teams are winning with those type of guys generally. The football guy is kind of getting, left in the dust.
Yeah, it's the analytic guys that teams want to go after, especially guys, if you've had dinner with Howie Roseman, you might get interviewed for an executive position around the NFL at this point. So another guy that's been out there in circles who's been named to be interviewing for other positions around the league. All right, moving along, final nugget, an all Eagles 3-pack nugget today for you, Mike Gill. And I heard you mention it with Mosher a little bit, but I want to dive a little deeper into this, that the New York Giants, they are retaining Joe Schoen and Brian Dable. I cannot believe after the debacle of the season they've had, letting go of Saquon Barkley, everything that's gone wrong in New York, they're not going to change things up. And Mara spoke, and he was essentially giving them one more year. He said essentially his patience has run thin, and he's going to give him one more shot. If your patience has run thin, I don't know why you wouldn't move on from these guys already. The Giants have just been in a downward spiral at this point, but it also it's back to the Eagles a little bit. I just want to compare the two. Yesterday, Jeffrey Lurie got his 300th win as an owner. There's been stability there. They don't hire a ton of head coaches during his tenure. It hasn't been a ton of them, right? And Nick Sirianni's been one of the winningest coaches in football. And, there's been rumors that if he loses the first game of the postseason, he could get fired. I think that's total nonsense because if you look with the Giants, they're keeping these two guys around after what they've done. Don't even buy any stock into this Eagles firing Nick Sirianni. It would have to be a complete disaster of a game for them to fire him. So I just found it interesting. The two dynamics of the two teams, very different.
Yeah, and I will say, I know on the surface, Brian Dable I like Brian Dable as the head coach. He, when he was there a couple of years ago, he got them to the playoffs. Quite frankly, they have no quarterback. Nobody's helping that team. So you could bring anybody you want there to coach that football team. You don't have a quarterback, you're not winning. He has shown when he had a team that was healthy, Saquon Barkley and the quarterback, Daniel Jones, he got them to the playoffs when they stayed healthy. He got them there. So I don't think Dable is the problem as the head coach. Joe Schoen as the GM, he made the Barkley decision that in Philly, it's easy for us to mock and laugh at them. But Saquon Barkley is not making that team better. They need a quarterback. So if you believe in his decision to say, look, we let Barkley walk, we didn't spend that money, and now that allows us to kind of do what we got neighbors. That was one piece. I can understand them saying we like the process that you have. Now, the way it played out it makes them look ridiculous. But inside the building, if he's saying, look, we had this plan to move on from Barkley. We got a piece of Neighbors. Now we need to get that quarterback. If you trust that he's the guy to get the quarterback, then you stick with him. Now, if you don't think he can get that quarterback, then you got to move on from them. But I don't think it's a total disaster that they kept those guys. It just looks so bad because of the Barkley thing.
Yeah, and Hard Knocks didn't help them. I'm sorry. Hard Knocks did not help them early on in the season with that going viral and everything that has played into it. Maury even commented on that commercial Saquon Barkley did, saying, why couldn't he have been in the commercial based upon the comments from Hard Knocks? It just has not gone right at all for the New York Giants. They had to release Daniel Jones this year. So a lot of changes there, but there hasn't been a lot of stability in New York. They've had to change coaches now a couple of times, GMs as well. So it's fascinating to see just the difference between the two. And by the way, I don't think the Eagles are going to fire Nick Sirianni if they lose in the playoffs. You just can't do that, especially since what he's been able to bring to this organization and a lot of winning. Remember, 14-win season.
I don't think Sirianni's in any trouble. I mean, outside of like a 45-0 loss, which I don't see happening either. And look, Sirianni's been excellent for this organization, this franchise. And that's what the Giants are saying. We need the stability. We need the patience, much like Philadelphia. Stability wins. And I think the Giants, by not being one of these knee-jerk – now, listen, Dable's going on to – I think he was hired the year before Sirianni, or was he right after Sirianni? Is this his third season, Dable?
Yeah, I think it's his third season, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's his third.
Yep. So, listen, I can't fault a team for saying we're not going to be over-reactionary. That's all.
Yep. All right. That's a 3-pack of Nuggets for you, Mike.
All right, Nick Earnshaw. Good stuff. We'll see you again tomorrow with more Nuggets here on the Sports Bash. And Nick's Nuggets are brought to you by Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City, the Fanatic Sportsbook. We will be there later on this week. Just looking for a little better day to do it. The Saints have requested an interview with Eagles offensive coordinator Kellen Moore for their head coaching position. And that, of course, would mean the Eagles would need another new offensive coordinator. We'll talk about that and more. John McMullen joins us next on the other side to get his takeaways from the game yesterday, the playoff matchup, Jalen Hurts, Tanner McKee, Dallas Goedert, and more. Plus, one thought every game, the final look at the 2024-2025 regular season. Casey Joyner, one thought every game at 5:25 on the Sports Bash. That's all still to come. This hour was brought to you today by our friends at Jersey Cow, a great place to hang out and eat ice cream. Ice cream is a year-round thing at Jersey Cow. They're open every day from noon to 10 in Northfield and in Brigantine. Check them out. I'm Mike Gill. More Sports Bash coming up on 97.3 ESPN. Johnny Mack joins me. Hey, final hour of the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, live streaming on the X platform, YouTube, at Mike Gill Show. John McMullen is host of Birds 365, weekday mornings at 8 a.m. on the Jacob Media YouTube channel. Mondays, he joins us in the ride home, 5 o'clock. Nick Sirianni spoke today. John was on that Zoom call. We'll get some takes from him on the Eagles as they get ready for the Green Bay Packers. You can hear the game on 97.3 ESPN this Sunday, 4:30 is the game. He's brought to you by Boardwalk Honda. Shop their lineup of new, pre-owned, and certified pre-owned Hondas online at boardwalkhonda.com. So, John, I got to imagine, I've been on your show enough. I know some of the viewers and the people who watch that show. Did you have people calling for Tanner McKee to start the playoff game on Sunday?
No, not yet. A little bit surprised.
Wow, I am surprised by that.
A lot of people think he should be the number 2.
I have that a lot as well.
But nobody has gone down the QB1 route yet. No, nobody seriously. Of course, you have some trolls and things like that, but nobody seriously has done that, and I'm proud of that fact. I'm surprised by it, but I'm also proud of it, and the fact that, not many people bought into he should be starting over Jalen Hurts. I think 90+% think he's better than Kenny Pickett, which the Eagles don't agree with, but.
I was going to say, today he got asked that question, Nick Sirianni. It was a lot of word salads, confident in both, feel good with where we're at. But the hypothetical would be if Hurts got hurt or was not cleared, and he should be cleared. I'll get your take on that in just a minute. Kenny Pickett would be the guy at this point, or did that answer give you some pause?
Well, the pause is related to his broken ribs. There's pause because that's a legitimate injury, and you want him out there. And you saw in the game against Dallas, took that punishment after breaking them against Washington. And so do you really want to go down that route? So I think from that standpoint, it's legitimate, but it's completely injury related. If Kenny's ready to go, he'll be the backup quarterback.
Well, we talked about this on last week's show a little bit, and then yesterday he throws 41 times, and I'm thinking, are the Eagles showcasing Tanner McKee to see if they can get someone to completely overvalue him and then give them like a third-round pick? And, we've seen the Eagles go down that road plenty of times.
If you can take advantage of, sure, yeah. Or, Kenny as well. So, that's what Howie will do. But certainly when they traded for Kenny Pickett, it was the idea that they would have a cost-effective backup for 2 seasons. But if you do feel comfortable in Tanner McKee and you can spin off Kenny Pickett, they would do that. They did it with Joe Flacco. And the same thing would happen here. Depending on which, obviously from a financial standpoint, it would be better to keep Tanner McKee. So if they do feel confident and they can go that route, they'll always explore that kind of thing.
John McMullen, you mentioned this. It just came out about an hour ago. Kellen Moore is getting an interview with the New Orleans Saints, his first interview request. You said a little strange season for Moore. Is he a legit candidate for this job, or is it just one of those things where, hey, we want to talk to someone who's leading the offense of one of the better teams in football?
Yeah, he doesn't feel like a hot candidate. You get a feel for the guy. Obviously, Ben Johnson's number 1. I would say Cliff Kingsbury's certainly ahead of him. And so, and there aren't a lot of open spots, less than usual to this point, unless somebody changes their minds, which is always possible. And you still have the Raiders shoe to drop. We'll see if they really move forward with Antonio Pierce. But you don't get a feel like he's a hot candidate, which is a good thing for the Eagles, obviously. But, that could change with a deep run in January. So especially if one of these teams starts to take a little bit of time and making their decision, and all of a sudden you're going to the Super Bowl. Well, what happened with Frank Reich? Now that was unique in the fact that Josh McDaniels left the Colts at the altar, but if you go to the Super Bowl, you saw it with Jonathan Gannon as well, sort of late in the process. Things can change, but right now he doesn't feel like a hot candidate.
I want to get your thoughts on McKee in this notion. They threw the ball 41 times. I feel like 25 of them was the same play. They seemingly did a little rollout to try to get the ball into Goddard's hands. There was a lot of safe stuff out in the flat. I'd like to see that play for Jalen Hurts a little bit more often, by the way. But I guess, did they just want to try to get Goddard involved, or was that something – because we really haven't seen that play all year long.
No, you're trying to build around the strengths of the quarterback. So this was a specific game plan for Tanner McKee. So you saw – I think it told you more about Kellen Moore than anything else. He will – and I think it's already shown with Jalen Hurts. People just don't recognize it. He will scale back. He scaled back from what he typically did in Dallas and with the Chargers because he had a different style of quarterback. Now he had a quarterback that is more comfortable under center, so he can run those sort of rollouts like you mentioned, and bootlegs and things like that. Whereas if you're in the shotgun,
is that not a play that Hurts is capable of?
He's capable of it, but he's just not as comfortable. They're typically in shotgun or pistol, so you're not going to do a bootleg out of a shotgun. Typically, you can, but it's not as typical. It's much more effective as a play action sort of, eyes, sleight of hand from under center, and Tanner McKee's just more comfortable doing it.
It's a play that they ran to ad nauseum yesterday, obviously. What did you make of Dotson's game yesterday?
Yeah, I thought he played. I thought he played great, and he showed like he's got talent. He might not have lived up to the billing of the 16th overall pick, but he generated in Washington. But he generated consistent separation in that game. Now, again, bad opponent, all those caveats, but if you don't throw it to a guy, he's not going to be productive. And generally, it's been the case with the third receiver on this team. He's not getting a lot of traffic with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, nor should he. But this is a guy who's far more talented than Wes Watkins or Olamide Zaccheaus or, not Julio Jones in his prime, but Julio Jones last year, one step away from retirement. He's more talented. He showed that, but he just doesn't have a big role on this team.
John, another quick offseason report here. Alec Halaby, another Eagle GM candidate. The Jets will interview the Eagles assistant GM, Alec Halaby, for their job. That will go down on Wednesday. I guess just another example of everybody always knocking on the Eagles front office door. But, they've lost a lot over the years. Would Halaby hurt or impact them any more than some of the others that have walked out the door?
I don't think so. I mean, the Eagles are set up this way. Not to say, Alec is eventually going to be a GM in this league, but, when you start to gauge, well, is he more important or less important than Joe Douglas or Andrew Berry or even the guys who left to be assistant GMs, Ian Cunningham, Brandon Brown, Catherine Race, now Catherine Hickman, and I'm probably missing one or two. That's how Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman have built this thing. They always talk about their front office talent and have guys in the pipeline. Chuck Walls is a name you'll hear if somebody leaves, or Brandon Hunt. They always have somebody ready to go, and that'll be the case if Alec does leave, and we'll see. These things are. Yeah, I think Jake Rosenberg was out there, another guy who left for a different avenue, now helping colleges. But, he tweeted today that, a lot of teams don't spend the money and the time and go all out in these searches and do it the right way. So you never know the route they're going to go. And the Jets, does Alec want to be there with that bad organization? And the Jets want to go down the route of hiring another ex-Eagles guy after Joe Douglas failed, and I put that in quotations. So, just because somebody requests an interview doesn't mean it's going to be a fit for either side. And that includes Alec's side.
Talking with John McMullen here, a couple takeaways from the game yesterday and then what it means moving forward here. I was at the game yesterday, John. I don't go to a lot of games, but in person yesterday I did get a chance to watch a little differently. And one guy I kept saying, man, 90s all over the place. It was like the best game Jordan Davis had ever played. And you wonder if did they use him differently yesterday, or is that just hey, the Giants are that bad?
Well, no. Well, I think he played a lot. Unfortunately, he's one of the starters that had to play. They don't have a lot of depth at nose tackle. They don't have. They really. I always talk about Jordan Davis's value to this team. I don't think people realize they don't have a backup for Jordan Davis. So, in other words, if he's not playing, if he's hurt or something of that, they pretty much have to scrap those 5-man fronts they want to use. And sometimes they use 6-man fronts, and they have to play more 4-man fronts and things like that. So he's really important in what they do, but unless it turns into a splash play, nobody notices. And I think he did a good job because he played a little bit more, and he was out there with lesser players. So he's a good player, and he stood out. That's what you should do.
You take a look at the one thing that was kind of cool, too. Josh mentioned this before the show. Sidney Brown gets the interception that clinches that game. He got hurt in that game last year. The Eagles not playing their starters. We saw injuries this weekend, and the Eagles obviously held their guys out. It was good to not see anything injured, but Sidney Brown getting that interception, kind of apropos that he got hurt in the game last year, wasn't able to play in the playoff game. He clinches that, and the Eagles beat the Giants. We move forward here. The Eagles played the Packers way back 19 weeks ago in Brazil. How long ago does that seem? But how different is this Eagles team than the one that played in Brazil?
Yeah, a lot different. I mean, they completely changed their offense in the bye week, after the Week 4 games. So completely different, I would say, from that standpoint. And they evolved defensively. So, that's so long ago. Packers, same way. They've evolved with different injuries and things like that. So, you have a lot of the same players, so you can learn from it. But yeah, both teams are, and that happens every year. If you're good enough to be a playoff team, you're not what you are in essentially wild card weekend, what you were in week 1. And if you are, you're probably not in the playoffs because you have to evolve and you have to get better.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing that's majorly different is Cooper DeJean did not play in that game. But I remember Monday, or I guess, it was Monday. It was a Friday night game. Talking to you Monday, and we're thinking, man, this Zach Bond, we got an all-pro linebacker here, and he never slowed down from that game.
No, he didn't. Yeah, that was the coming out party for Zach Bond, no doubt about it. And he has been tremendous. I'm just putting together my all-pro and award voting for AP. I'm one of the 50 guys, so and he's in my top 5. I'll just say that. I can't say where he is, but he's in my top 5 of Defensive Player of the Year. And who predicted that?
Nobody.
And he's deservedly in.
So what's going to happen with him?
He's going to get a lot of money, whether it's here or somewhere else. And if it's here, obviously that would be a shift in philosophy from Howie Roseman typically at that particular position. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting because he's earned it. He's going to get it from somebody. And if it's not Philadelphia, it's going to be somebody else.
Yeah, that one's going to be interesting. I think him and Becton are going to be obviously are the two biggest things in this offseason, right? I mean, I don't want to get too far in the offseason, but those two are really going to be the two. One of the more unique challenges that Howie's had in his time here.
Yeah, I mean, and it comes down to, how much do you believe in the guys behind them? In the case of Becton, Tyler Steen, in the case of backbone, it would be Jeremiah Trotter Jr. So,
who played well yesterday, and so did Burks.
Yeah, Burks played great. I think he just got another tackle. I think he had 17 tackles. Not that says anything. If you're tackling somebody 7 yards down, from the line of scrimmage, it doesn't really matter. But he was very active. He was always near the football. And most of those tackles came near the line of scrimmage.
Mm-hmm.
So he played very well.
No question about it. No, him and Trotter both played well, and you wonder, what the mindset is from Howie. As you said, they have not spent money in that position, but as Bond won them over so much that they have to change their way of thinking. That's something we'll be keeping an eye on as well. The Nick Sirianni question, John, if they lost this game, any concern for him that he would not be back if they lost this game?
No. I mean, if it's 40-0, I reserve the right to change my mind. But no, if they lose a typical one-score game, obviously he's going to get killed on talk radio. He's going to get killed in the fan base. But no, he's not in danger of losing his job.
Is the kicking situation the biggest question mark entering the game?
Well, no, I think the biggest question mark is Jalen Hurts.
So that's still a big question for you.
No, it's not. I meant for the public at large.
Gotcha.
He's going to play. But I think that has overtaken everything. As far as realistic, yeah, I get what you're saying. I'm not overly concerned. I mean, people act like a kickoff out of bounds is like a catastrophe. It happens. I saw it 3 other times this weekend.
Well, I'm talking more about the fact that he missed another field goal that he generally makes, right, yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, Jake Elliott has not had a great season, but you are where you are, and you hope he's hot on a particular day. Typically, you're certainly not as confident in him right now as you typically are. That's the first kick he missed under 40 yards all year.
Mm-hmm.
He's generally only missed, plus 50s. So, yeah, there's a little bit of concern over Jake Elliott, but, as the weather turns, especially in outdoor games, it becomes more difficult to kick. So there's a little bit of concern, but I think from the Eagles' standpoint, that could turn into a strength because if it's 4th and 3 and the option is to go for it or kick a 50-yard field goal, they might go for it, and I think that would be helpful because I think, if you're ultimately going to beat Detroit, you saw it again last night, they're relentless. You stop a team on 3rd and 8 and it's 4th and 3 and you're raising your hands and saying, we're going to get off the field. You're not getting off the field.
Well, we'll break this game down. We'll look at the matchup with the Packers, who lost Christian Watson, and it looks like he will be out. He tore his ACL, so it looks like they're going to be a man down there. Jordan Love should play in the game. I think that was more precautionary there. We'll talk more about it all week long right here on the Sports Bash. The Eagles will host the Green Bay Packers Sunday at the Link, 4:30 right here on 97.3 ESPN. All right, John, we'll touch base with you tomorrow.
All right, thanks, Mike.
There's John, and, of course, he is brought to you by Boardwalk Honda. Shop your lineup of new, pre-owned, and certified pre-owned Hondas online at boardwalkhonda.com. When we come back, it's One Thought Every Game. Casey Joyner is here to look at the final week of the NFL regular season. That's next. This is the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN.
97.3.
All right, 527 Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. The football scientist Casey Joyner is back for one thought every game from The Athletic. We'll get his take on the final week of the regular season. But some things happened. People got fired. Lou Amarillo just got fired, by the way, a little while ago. Bengals decided their defense was no good. They're going to move on from Lou. The Giants are keeping Brian Daboll. We don't know what's going on in Dallas. We got a lot of things happening. We'll get into that and more. One thought every game. Casey Joyner from The Athletic is back, this time on a Monday as the season is over. We're going to get a fresh look because all the games are over. There is no Monday Night Football. Sadly, this is that time of the year, Casey, where playoffs are here. You're excited, but the grind is over. The Thursday, the Monday, the Sunday, it's over with here. I can't believe it, but it's good to see you on a Monday.
It is. If you talk to people in the football world, a lot of them are, we all love football, but believe me, after week 18, a lot of people are breathing like, oh my gosh, I'm ready for some downtime. But you know what? I'm ready for some playoff football. It's going to be awesome. This looks like an awesome slate this week.
Yeah, and I know we generally go through, we kind of get our hands dirty on that Eagles game. But the one thing I guess yesterday we saw Tanner McKee. Big talk here is if Hurts could not play, do you play McKee or Pickett?
I'd probably still play Pickett, but the idea of I used to subscribe to the old register. You have the great starter, you have the veteran backup, and you have the developmental quarterback. And if you can win with the developmental quarterback, again, McKee goes in yesterday and he plays. Yeah, he's the Giants aren't a good team and things, but okay, he's playing a lot of their starters and things, and he's doing quite well. You could, in other words, if you had a situation where those two guys were hurt and you had to play McKee in week 12 against this Giants team, okay, if you're the Eagles, I can win with that. We won today. I bet we could win early in the season too. So it has to make it feel great to have that option. But right now, I still look at him as the developmental 3 because I'll take the veteran at 2.
All right, we'll get into one thought every game with Casey Joyner here. Some of these games didn't have some meaning. Some of them did. Some guys got fired, as we said, because of it. Let's go, Bucks and Saints. The Bucks needed this game. They clinched the South, 4th consecutive year, 3rd longest active streak in the division. The Saints kind of hung in there, but this Buccaneers team is dangerous.
They are. Don't like the idea that they didn't seem to take this game as seriously as they should. I mean, Saints aren't a very good team, but come on, you can't wait. Hope you get 2 fourth-quarter touchdown passes to win. But that's the idea. 2 fourth-quarter touchdowns, I'd say. That's the idea. Hey, look, this is a Bucs team that can put up 27 when they're only playing at half speed, and I think that this is a team that could easily put up 30 in any playoff game. They're an offense that you do not want to see, and their run defense has been fantastic too. They're going to be trouble to get out of the playoffs.
Saints finished 5-12. They fired their coach. They are interviewing Kellen Moore, by the way, is one of the names that they will take a look at. 27-19 Bucks win. Panthers 44, Falcons 38. The Falcons needed this game and lost to Carolina. Carolina finishes 5-11. They'll miss the playoffs for the 7th year in a row. But man, 44 burger on a team that needed the game.
You're feeling better about your offseason right now if you're Carolina than you are if you're Atlanta, which a few weeks ago, you'd never think that would happen. Bryce Young, okay, he looks like, but now we know why he was taken so early. Canales figured out how to make that offense work for him, and they scored 44. And come on, you put up nearly that's a season high for them. But Atlanta, you lose 6 out of your last 8. You're losing to Carolina in a game that you wouldn't have made the playoffs, but you needed to win this game. And your defense couldn't get anything done. If you're Atlanta, you're just like, hey, this is not good. Raheem Morris is a great coach in a lot of ways, but his team, he just hasn't had any regular season success, and he's got to show he can do it because 6 out of 80 and losing that many, I mean, that's good. That carries over.
Did they find their quarterback, Atlanta?
Yeah, they did. Penix is the guy, and they've got Robinson. They've got it there. They just need to know. You need to get those two playing for a full season and see what the offense is. How much of it do you want to be a great passing team or be a great running team? Because with Robinson, you can be a great running team, but with Penix, you can be a great passing. You can't be both. You're great passing, good running the other way around. They got to figure that out. But I think Penix gives them, if they even just want to be a great running team, good passing team, he does it. So they're good there. They can solve these problems. Just 6 out of 8. That's depressing.
One thought every game. Commanders, they win 12th time this year. It's the most since 1991. Take me back, Joe Gibbs. They get the 6th seed there. Trey Lance, 20-24, 244. The Cowboys lose, and now they have to make a decision on the coach there. He's going to interview with the Bears, but it's not a fait accompli that he leaves Dallas.
I don't think he's the problem. I mean, they've got some defensive issues, a lot of defensive issues and things that they need to fix that side of the ball. Then Quinn and look, they're just not doing the same with and since he left. So, but Dallas,
Zimmer.
The Zimmer, yeah. I mean, Zimmer's just he did just get engaged to a 42-year-old Maxim model. So he's doing something right. Yeah, he's doing something right. But Washington, hey, look, for them to keep playing as hard as they did and to play as hard as they did with all their backups and things, hey, that's that shows that this team is they're focused the right way. Washington's gonna be tough out in the playoffs too.
One thought every game. All right, Packers, I mean, they kind of needed the game. They lose 24-22. They lose Christian Watson in the game. Jordan Love goes out. Now, they're going to make the playoffs, but they now have to face Philadelphia here. Jordan Love leaves. The Bears snap a 10-game losing streak, and now they'll look for a new coach.
If you're the Packers, you don't ever want to lose to the Bears. Don't care if it's a meaningless game at the end. I mean, that's why you're playing Love until he gets hurt. And you say he's fine and all.
Yeah, by the way, it's Matt LaFleur's first loss to the Bears ever. He won 11 straight.
11 straight. And hey, you don't ever want to. And it's not a good sign. They lost against Minnesota. To lose this game, they're going in cold. I mean, this is a team. Again, if you Eagles, don't overlook these guys. Don't just don't blow this off. This is still a very good team. But the Packers right now, they're trending in the wrong direction. And give the Bears credit for the win. But I mean, this is more about the Packers. Just they're missing something right now, and you might have to find out what that is in the wild card round.
One thought every game: Patriots, they win. They beat the Bills 23-16, and yet Jared May, did he get fired for winning that game yesterday? I think they found their QB possibly, and obviously the Bills just kind of getting ready for the playoffs.
Yeah, they lose the number one pick, but again, if the number one pick is going to be a quarterback, they have their quarterback. They're fine there, so that might not be such a bad thing. It's Mayo. There's a lot of coverage on Athletic and things. Look, there's a lot of things that were not right there, and even Belichick even said today, he said, "Hey, look, they made their choice. They knew what they were getting," and he kind of threw him under the bus without throwing him under the bus. So the Patriots are what they are. They need a full turnaround. But you get a guy like Vrabel, he can get you back to respectable pretty quick and things. And I'm not worried about Buffalo losing the game because they'll be fine for the playoffs.
One thought every game: Colts, Jags, overtime. Peterson gets fired here in Jacksonville. It's kind of a weird situation. The Colts, though, they're going to retain Shane Steichen both seasons. Kind of like disappointing for both of them. Probably the Jags more than the Colts, but both teams went into that game thinking, is the coach coming back? One stayed, one went.
On the Colts, I think because you're getting so much outside push, I imagine Irsay might have just been saying that there might be people outside the organization who think they're going to bully me into firing my coach, and he's just trying to say, "Look, I'll make the decision on the coach. I'm not going to earn the GM. I'll do that. That's not something that I'm going to let other people do." I think that might be his pushback against that. If all that ruckus doesn't rise up in the past couple weeks, maybe he makes a different decision. But by the way, Ballard's still a really good GM too. He gets a lot of talent and things. They got a little bit of their situation to figure out in Jacksonville. You start over again. Okay, now you're going to be another couple 3 years before you're going to be even a good team. I mean, it's a good situation, but you can't keep turning people over, and that's just an organization that's not built to win.
All right, one thought every game: the Texans win. They're in the playoffs. Back-to-back 10-win seasons for them. The Titans, they are looking for a whole different situation and vibe down there as well. It's been a lost year for them. Do they need a new quarterback? 3-14. It's the most losses for Tennessee in franchise history. It also ties a couple other seasons when they lost. But it was just a lost season for the Titans. And it feels like an organization that just has no identity. They went out and signed veteran players last year, Pollard and Ridley, and got really, too, DeAndre Hopkins. And you win 3 games there. So that organization looks like it needs to be turned upside down.
I think Callahan, their head coach, he's been saying now that maybe I'll let – I'm reading a book by Michael Silver called "Why Is Everything." He's talking. It's about some of the studies about some of the new like McVay and that whole group of people make Shannon. He said that Mike Tomlin at one point said that he told one of the other coaches that when it comes to being a head coach, it's like there's a big pipe over your desk and you just get a bunch of crap on your desk every day, and that's what you got to do. That's your whole job, is taking care of that. I think Brian Callahan's realizing that's what my job is. He's trying to do play calling, other things like, look, get somebody to do the play calling so you can handle the head coaching duties and take care of that. He said he needs to get more involved in defense. So I think the Titans still have a good coach there, and I think they realized maybe he just needed a year to get his feet set. But for the Texans, by the way, real quick, Texans, I mean, it's either they get the win, that's great, and it makes them feel better, but I don't trust their ability to handle bully ball. They just didn't get tested strong enough in their division, like Belichick said, and I think that's going to hurt them in the playoffs.
The Texans have been in the playoffs 8 times. They have been the Saturday 3:30 game all 8 of those appearances. So not a high-profile, glamorous team. The Texans, which, by the way, is surprising. They went out and upgraded on a team that was a surprise. This has been a disappointing season for a team that's in the playoffs. One thought every game. Broncos 38, Chiefs, nothing. Holy mackerel. Did they not want the Bengals in the playoffs? Is that what we're saying here? And is Denver, you said it weeks ago on this segment here, one thought every game. You thought Denver was a scary playoff team. Well, they beat the Chiefs. I know, the backups, 38-0.
Only the second shutout in the NFL this season. So, and again, that's Andy Reid offense, and they didn't let anything happen. I'm sure Andy didn't do anything super creative, but still, 38-0 is 38-0, and they got right. I get 24-0 at halftime. They just put the foot to the floor. Nix is a really good quarterback. Sutton's a very good receiver. Mins and Valet are solid secondary receivers. They've got a trio of running backs. They're on a committee situation, but those committees can work. You don't wear your backs out, so they've got that. They've got a really good defense. I mean, Denver's not going to be an easy out. Even for Buffalo this week, Denver will not be an easy out. I don't think Denver will win that game. Buffalo's not going to run away with that thing. I think Denver goes toe-to-toe with them, and they're a team that they may not make noise this year, but you give them another year or two, and this is a Super Bowl contender.
One thought every game with Casey Joyner from The Athletic. Let's go to the Chargers and the Raiders. Chargers, they flip-flop playoff spots. They will now be the 5th seed in the AFC. They'll get to play the Texans here. I think that's a better matchup for them instead of having to get stuck playing Baltimore and the Raiders. Another lost season for them. Second verse, same as the first. 0-6 against the AFC West. They haven't lost all 6 divisional games since 2006. That's the level of ineptitude for the Raiders this year.
Yeah, and you thought either bringing the new coach or it is okay, he's players coach and all that. It sounds like they might be keeping him. It's like kind of up in the air and things. They're just not like, it's not been clarified. He's not been told he's gone, so that's a plus. You'll last another day. But yeah, the Raiders, it's an organizational thing. They just need it. You got to start from the top down. They need a complete organizational overhaul. For the Chargers, got to give them credit. They get that win. And Harbaugh said last week, he said, look, I just assumed the 5 seed sounds great to me. He said the 5 seed, like you said, he met Houston. Hey, Houston sounds great to me. I'd rather play Houston than go into Baltimore and play my brother again because he doesn't have very much luck playing him. So it's a big thing for them. And the Raiders, I know the Steelers, I know they lost that a game we'll talk about in a second, but the Steelers needed it. The Steelers not winning did the Chargers a big favor.
Yeah, and by the way, Saturday, I thought they should have played the Steeler game first.
Yes. Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, why not play the Steelers game first? Because then the Steelers have something more to play for. Because once Baltimore won, the Steelers are only playing for that 5 seed, and the Steelers aren't as motivated, I think, by who they play. I mean, again, Harbaugh doesn't want to play his brother. That's a big motivation for him. So I'm not surprised to see them put their foot to the floor to try to get a big win against the Raiders. Again, the Chargers hate the Raiders, but I think Harbaugh wanted to make sure he didn't play his brother in week 1.
I agree with you there. All right, one thought every game. Jets-Dolphins. The Dolphins had a shot, but that was kind of minimized when they looked up at the scoreboard. Did Aaron Rodgers, 23 of 36, 274, 4 touchdown passes, and he revive teams maybe making a play for him next year? And then the Dolphins, their offseason of uncertainty begins. Tyreek Hill says, I want out of this place after signing a huge contract extension.
Jalen Ramsey also said something similar. That he's like, hey, I'm done here too. Like, really?
They all want to come back and join Vic Fangio?
I guess so. Something. It seems to be that, I mean, the Dolphins, there's something about McDaniel and things that I was mentioning in that book about Michael Silver and things. He talked about how all these coaches, how you're talking Morris and you're talking LaFleur and you're talking Shanahan, and you're talking McDaniel, you're talking McVay. He said that a number of people told them that leadership skills are not their strength. They're all scheme coaches. They can scheme up really well, but leadership skills are not their strength. And you see what's happening in Miami, go, wow, that's if you got your two of your best players saying one out, that's not a good thing. As far as Rodgers goes, hey, he can still do certain things. Man, I tell you what, he'd never do it. But I mean, if you'd love to put him in a situation where he could be, a guy who could bring a backup along, or somebody who could get in a situation where he could be a backup quarterback or something of that nature. You could get in a situation in there. I mean, get to the Giants and turn them around or something. There's a lot of different situations where he could do what he needs to do, because he's only a third quarter. It's just not many quarterbacks can throw 500 passes in their 40s like that. He's only a third to do it, and I just don't know that you want to bank on that if you're a team. But there's still value for him. Or he could say, "Hey, I threw 4 touchdown passes in my last game, and that's it."
One thought every game. Cardinals 47, 49ers 24. Am I reading this right? The Cardinals swept the Niners this year. It's their 23-point win, the largest over San Fran since 2015. This feels like, by the way, the Niners lost 11 games this year. They finished 1-5 in the division. They were 11-1 against NFC West foes the last 2 years. This feels like a quitteroni here by the Niners.
And it feels like the Cardinals saying, yeah, we know we lost, but you know what? We're going to go out on a high note. The worst, because Gannon's kept them motivated. They're motivated at the beginning of the year, motivated when they're last year when they're a bad team. He doesn't have any problem keeping that team motivated. It's a really good job on his part. They need some things on that team, the Cardinals, to take the next step, but they built a lot right now, and they showed it there. And the Niners, yeah. I mean, again, I got to give the Niners gave them a little bit of a break because they have tons of injuries. I mean, Garendo gets hurt early in this game. I mean, they're playing Patrick Taylor, a fifth-string running back. It's tough, and they don't have all their top guys out there. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I think this is a situation where the Cardinals are like, we want to establish that you better be thinking about us in the future when we reestablish this. And it gives your team, by the way, you get a win like this against the Niners. I know it's against backup things, but it can, that whole jinx of we can't beat these guys, that can be something that you can, if you flipped it over to your side, the other team has to start thinking about that. It's something to carry forward.
One thought every game. The one game that really did have a lot of meaning. Lions 31, Vikings 9. The Lions are the 1 seed. The Vikings fall to 5. What a night for Sam Darnold. 18 of 41. They were 0 for 4 in the red zone, 0 for 3 on third down, and they just could not do anything against the blitz. He was blitzed on 56% of his dropbacks. The Lions figured out the Vikings, and they are the number 1 seed.
Anzalone's a really big ad for their defense. He gets them in the right position where they're supposed to be and all that. That's a huge plus for them. And again, the Lions, I think when you get down to a game like this, what was it going to for a while? It was going to a slugfest game. We can't get in the end zone. If it's slugfest, if it's shootout, I mean, the Vikings, I can trust them to keep up the Lions, although the Lions probably are a little better even in shootout games. When a slugfest game, it gets like that, I'll take the Lions 7 days a week because the Vikings they don't do that very well. And it got to that. And Gibbs, at the end of the game in the fourth quarter, those 2 touchdown runs and 4 touchdowns for the game, it was, the Lions wore the Vikings down. By the way, and if you saw the interaction after the game, Campbell, he says, hey, we'll see you in 2 weeks. So it's like, and that's one of those things. If you're the Rams and you win, you're like, oh, hey, you guys didn't think we'd win. I mean, it's one of those things where you don't want to get that captured by cameras if you can help it.
Casey Joyner's one thought every game right here on the Sports Bash. That is a wrap on the 2024 season. But one thought every game is back on Friday. We'll take a look at Super Wild Card Weekend with Casey Joyner here from The Athletic. We've got a ton of games to get into. 2 on Saturday, 3 on Sunday, 1 on Monday, and we'll do that here on the Sports Bash. All right, Casey, appreciate it, pal.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
All right, there he is. One thought every game. Casey Joyner from The Athletic here on the Sports Bash. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash. Some breaking news. Joel Embiid will not play tonight. He is out against the Suns, that according to Keith Pompey. So no Joel Embiid against the Suns, and just adds to the frustration. I don't know what's wrong with him, is whether or not, their schedule's busy. They played the Nets Saturday. They play tonight. They play Wednesday. They play Friday. They play Sunday. They play Tuesday. They play Wednesday. So they do have a lot of games jammed in here. But why tonight? Why the Suns? Why not against Washington on Wednesday, who stinks out loud? Give me him against the Suns. Go without Wednesday night against Washington. Frustrating. I was all ready to watch some Sixers tonight. They're a game out. They're starting to play better. They've won like 15 out of 20 or something like that. And then Joel Embiid out tonight. Well, you can listen to the game tonight on 97.3 ESPN. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash. We have my Bet365 play of the day coming up. And who gets the credit for yesterday's Eagles win. Casey Joyner, by the way, brought to you by Cooper University Healthcare. They're doing something extraordinary for families down the shore. We'll wrap up the Sports Bash coming up next. All right, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. Who gets the credit? It's brought to you by South Jersey's Federal Credit Union. Make the switch and bank with your only community credit union. South Jersey Federal Credit Union offers some of the lowest loan rates around, including refinancing. Learn more at jerseyfcu.org. I'm going to go Tanner McKee. I got to give the kid a little credit. I mean, played well, put the ball where it needed to be, made a couple plays, threw a couple touchdowns. He gets the credit from me.
I'm going Jordan Davis. He could have sulked. He could have been like, why am I out here with these scrubs? But he said, no, I'm going to have the greatest game of my life, and I'm going to show you that I do deserve more playing time.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, he didn't really factor into why they won the game, though. So I got to give it to credit. I mean, to McKee. They win the game because...
I don't think you're giving the defense enough credit.
Well, I mean, the Giants are so bad. Their offense is hideous. Their defense is actually decent.
They scored over 40 points the week before.
Yeah, 1 week. So is that who they are? They're the team that scores 40?
Well,
I mean, I did watch it for 17 other weeks, suck out loud. So I'm going to go with the fact that their offense isn't very good. I'm going to give the credit to Tanner McKee. All right, it is time for the Bet365 play of the day. How was our weekend, Josh?
Mike, I hate to disappoint you, but you went 1-2.
Your Friday picks. Not my best effort.
Minnesota in the Duke's Mayo Bowl did go under. You got that one right. You heard that game on 97.3 ESPN. Wizards did not cover. They lost by 10 on Friday. And then the Packers and Bears hit the over, 42.
All right, I like the Spurs tonight, -3. Portland tonight, -6.5 is my Bet365 plays of the day. What's our record overall there, Josh?
91-63-1.
91-63-1. So I'm still making you guys a ton of money. So stick with me with the plays. Spurs -3, Portland -6.5. They are my Bet365 plays of the day.
Are you telling people to trust the process?
Might as well. I mean, 60, whatever.
91-63-1.
That sounds like 27 games or something over 500. I'll take it. That's a lot of units for the people out there.
A lot of units.
A lot of units. All right, Sixers and Suns coming up tonight on 97.3 ESPN. No Joel Embiid tonight. That's unfortunate.
It's very unfortunate.
Yeah, I'm really down about that, man. I might have to just try to find a new net. You know what I just watched? Oh, man, what was it called? Keira Knightley was in it.
Heard that name in a long time.
Yeah, she was like a what the heck was that show just called? I'm that bad. I just watched the show, and now I can't remember the name of the show.
Is that
it was a 6-episode. It's on Netflix.
Netflix, okay.
Yeah. So, Keira Knightley.
Google Keira Knightley and Netflix.
What the heck was the name of that show? We just finished that up. It was all right. Pretty good. I'll think of it tomorrow. All right, I'm back tomorrow. We will be at Fanatics Sportsbook, most likely on Wednesday. Show game nights up next, followed by the Sixers. Have a great night, everybody.